Good evening. We're going to call the meeting to order. So this is the School Redistricting Start Times and Transportation Advisory Committee for March 11th, 2025. First, we will go around the room and we'll just do introductions for roll call. And just because we do have members of the public here, if you can just, when you announce who you are, just like what you're representing. If you're a teacher from the school or a parent from the community, just that way people know the representation, even though it's listed online. I think it's just helpful to know that as we go around the room. So Kenny Duba, Superintendent of Schools.
Rob Mezzanotte, Assistant Superintendent.
I'm Stephanie Bernava. I'm taking notes tonight. I'm the school committee clerk.
Hi, Brian LeMay. I'm a parent and also a coach in town for the last decade.
Sean Donovan, also parent.
Courtney Hanker, parent of an elementary, middle, and high schooler. Dr. Rachel Santa, the Director of Student Services for the district. Nicole Pitchner, Principal at Stony Lane.
Fred Schweitzer, Principal at Hamilton.
Jennifer Harrison, teacher at Hamilton Kindergarten.
TJ Maresca, I'm a parent.
Lucy, I'm a junior here. Elizabeth, I'm a junior here.
I'm Kayla Van Gordon. I'm the 5th grade teacher at Quinessa Elementary School.
Lydia Hanhart, I'm the Title I coordinator for the school part.
Jennifer Hancock, I'm a bus contractor with the North Kingstown Bus Contractors Association.
Michelle Hume, the transportation supervisor.
Megan Riley, I'm a school committee member, but I'm also a parent to two elementary school children and one high schooler who goes here and another high schooler who goes elsewhere.
So we did decide when we put the agenda together to put the public comment at the end. That way we can go through the work session of this advisory committee. This advisory committee is not typical, I would say, to some of the other committees we have, where it's a lot of like discussion and talk around a table. It really is more of a work session where we get up and work as a group. So I wanted to make sure that we had time to do that, and then also give members of the public to listen and hear what we're saying, so that if they wanted to comment on something that we brought up, they can do so during public comment. So members of the public, the sign-up sheet, if you have not signed up yet, the sign-up sheet is back on the bookcase there. If you did not sign up and you decide to sign up later, we'll give you a chance to do so, and then give everyone a chance to be able to speak and provide comments at the end of the meeting. So the first items on the agenda is to start by just kind of discussing feedback that we received from the community. A lot of people came out to the school committee meeting, the last school committee meeting we had, as well as numerous emails that we have received. And just kind of discuss how we want to kind of take that feedback, but also that we are listening and listening to that feedback as we are making decisions and going through this process. But also just kind of going back and maybe just kind of summarizing back, like, why are we here? Right? What are we doing? Why are we here? Just to make sure everyone understands that. I think all of you know because you joined the committee and can be part of it, but just making sure people in the public also understand that why we're here. What's the reason? It's not just because we decided one day, let's redistrict, but there's data that supports it. There's reasons behind it from the past few years, even before I have stepped in here as superintendent. And typically, every 5 to 6 years, districts do go through this. So redistricting, we're looking at boundary lines, looking at enrollment in schools, and having to make some of those changes just to better utilize the schools that they do have. So I think what we'll do, and I'd like to do, is to kind of go back to the data we started looking at the December meeting, and just to be able to kind of look through that, and that way, just to kind of have that conversation again as a reminder of why we're here and what that data was showing us. And just to, I also like to just kind of share like my experience since I became superintendent here with the overcrowding at some of our schools, specifically Hamilton, and decisions I've had to make each summer with having to unfortunately involuntarily transfer students because there's no space in the school, the impact it has on other schools. Put that up on the screen.
I have a little bit of a hard time hearing you on this side.
All right, I'll use the microphone. I'm trying not to have to use the microphone.
I know, sorry.
I promise I won't break out in song. That's happening in the auditorium with our professionals there. Definitely don't sing.
For your big day.
That's right. So, all right. Actually, everyone has this in front of them, but it's on the screen as well, so you can see that. So this is the data we started looking at back in December. And it's looking at some data from RIDE, the Department of Education, based on what information they have as far as square footage of our buildings, grade configuration, functional capacities, aspirational capacities, and then we have our current capacity in there. Those are the numbers at the time in December of our current capacity at the schools, which capacity changes throughout the year. Kids move in, kids leave, and those numbers change by, it could be 5 or 10 throughout the year. And then we have a difference of current capacity versus aspirational. So your functional capacity is basically looking at your square footage of your building, how many students you can have. Your aspirational capacity is what is going to be best for the school. How many students? You don't always want to go to the full amount, but what works for the school? And those numbers were provided to us through the facility assessment that RIDE had completed. You also have utilization numbers that the state uses for elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. And the recommendation for a utilization of an elementary school is 95% capacity. Middle school is 85%, high school is 75%. So when you look at our schools and you look at current capacity, we're going to use the aspirational capacity of where we want to be in the schools. Fishing Cove, at the time when this data was put together in December, had 344 students. And the capacity that we look at for the school is 352, right? So we were just under by 8 students of where you would be. And in that school, 18 of those classrooms are used for grade level grades K to 5. And then there were 5 rooms that are used for preschool. That's not counting all the rooms that are used for speech, OT, sensory room, intervention, special education, any other space that's there. At Forest Park, the current capacity at the time was 264, aspirational capacity of 259, so we were over by 5 students. There are 13 classroom spaces there that are used for K to 5. Also, there are special education programs, again, speech, OT, intervention. So at Forest Park, every single classroom every learning space is used either as a classroom or used for special education services or music, art. Cafeteria is also split as a gymnasium. At Hamilton, the capacity at the time was 446, aspirational capacity of 395. We were over by 51 students. There are 25 classroom spaces being used. Every space at Hamilton is used at the current time to the point where a first grade classroom is shared with a reading specialist. So there is absolutely no space in that school to expand in any way. And rooms are doubled up with interventionists or special ed teachers as well. At Knesset, the capacity at the time was 212. The aspirational capacity is 307, under by 95. So when we talk about trying to better utilize our schools, we have an elementary school that is not used to its fullest. And that's also part of what we're looking at we have schools that are over, and we have schools that are under. At Stony Lane, the capacity is 384, and the aspiration capacity is 415. So we're just under by 31, and we have 20 classrooms there from K to 5. We also, when we had to, sure by the microphone keeps going in and out, we had to add kindergarten classrooms, and they were added at Stony Lane because that's where there was space. And also looking at transportation purposes, the students that were going there were students from Hamilton because of an overage. We could have put them at Quidesset, but looking at the transportation and the routes, it made sense for them to go to Stony Lane based on times. So when you look at those numbers, you look and say, okay, well, if we know what the capacities are, we know what the aspirational capacities are, we know we're under, and we know we're over. The other information too that we to consider is how many kids do we have to transfer each year? Last summer, we had to move 21 elementary students from their home school to another school because the schools were overcrowded. Or what, I don't want to say just, not just overcrowded, but we hit cap at a certain grade level. Of the 21 students, 14 of them were from Hamilton, based on where we were over in our classroom spaces, classroom numbers, based on a contract. So our contract that we have with our teachers union also has the stipulation in there of how many students are in a class, and that's based on what best practice is. So in kindergarten, the classroom cap is 19. And it increases as you go up in grades. So it's 19 in grade 1, it's 24, grade 2 is 24, and then in grades 3, 4, and 5, it's 26. And it's based on best practice of how many students and what that student-teacher ratio is. And we don't go over unless there's a special situation, and our contract does allow us to pay an overage to the teacher. But that's a special situation. That's just not, okay, we do it because it's in the contract. We also want to follow best practice of what that student-teacher ratio needs to be in each classroom. If you look at the next page in your document, so the next page of the document, it says projections for 24-25. That was the sheet that we were using, planning for this current school year. But those numbers are up to date. That document in front of you shows how many students there are at each grade level at each school. And I added some additional information in the columns to the right. So let's first look at Fishing Cove. Fishing Cove is our pre-K through 5 elementary school. We have 5 classrooms at Fishing Cove for our preschool program. It's a district preschool program, special education program. There are classes there that are considered inclusion classrooms. You have a max of 15 students, and of the 15 students, 7 students are students that receive special education services, and then 8 are typical peers. We also have a program that is mainly for students with special needs that need more intense services. Those are district programs that are held at Fishing Cove. The remainder of the building are the K-5 classrooms that are there for that zone. If you look at this, you can see how many students are currently there and what the student-to-teacher ratio is. We have 2 classes of each grade level at Fishing Cove for K-5. On this document, you see how many students are in each grade level and what that student-teacher ratio is, and then how many seats are remaining at each school. I'm sorry, seats are remaining in each classroom. Anything in orange, we color orange because we're close to cap. Red, we are at cap. Yellow, there's space. There are 314 students currently at Fishing Cove, right? That's pre-K through grade 5. The capacity, aspirational capacity, is at 352. When you look at utilization of the building, that's at 89%. The building also has 6 rooms that are used for special education programs, 5 for the preschool and 1 for a district program. So we need to consider that as well, for what is being used in the building. At Forest Park,
Sorry, can I interrupt?
Yes.
Ask a question about that for clarification? Okay.
So oh God, I'm so loud. Okay, so
I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at the special ed program use, and I'm looking at Fish and Cove at 6. However, I go down to Stony Lane, and I'm thinking about the space that's used. So I'm thinking, and Dr. Santa, where are you? Hi, not to put you on the spot, but I'm thinking that these 6 at Fish and Cove, are we talking programs? Because then if you look down at Stony, there are actually, when I think about the building, there are a number of, this is for people who've never been in the building, there are a number of other spaces that are being used for other things like, you know, OT or, and I'm trying, I mean, I could count 1, 2, 3, you know, 5 or 6 different areas that are being used. They may not be called special education programs, but just so everyone knows, that takes up a large portion of the building. So you might look at Stony and see, okay, 1, but that doesn't mean there's just 1 classroom isolated for a special ed program. So I'd like to be very clear on that so that people don't say, oh, Stony Lane only has 1, they have plenty of space. Because when I think about Stony, every single space is being used there.
Yeah, so I think, you know, especially it's been thrown around a lot, so I appreciate the time to kind of discuss that. Essentially, we have 5 elementary schools. Each elementary school has some form of a specialized program at this particular point. And each one has kind of a different configuration. So at Stony, they specifically have Compass K classroom that is a very small classroom. It's actually a converted copy room. To be very honest, it's a converted copy room. At Fishing Cove, we have Positive Pathways, which is a program to support kids with social, emotional, and behavioral difficulties. That was a classroom that was transitioned from DA to Fishing Cove in order to provide students more access to typical peers. And I have to tell you, it's been very successful. That takes up 1 classroom, typical classroom space, just to give you some space now. At Hamilton, we have 2 programs. The Compass right now is 1 to 2 and a 3 to 5. That meets the needs of our students with much more severe disabilities, students that are nonverbal, that need lots of, not all are nonverbal, but need a lot of assistance. They may have assistive communication devices. They may need nursing care, things along those lines. They have a classroom space, but it's not a full-size classroom space. Each kind of like have it's almost like a half space. I'm looking at Fred, it's like half of the classroom space. So the whole program takes up 1 entire classroom essentially. At Quinessa, we have intensive resource. They are actually sharing a space with other teachers. And then, I'm missing a school, Forest Park. Forest Park has 2 intensive resource classrooms, and they actually are using 2 classroom spaces for that. Every school has what we would call resource support. That's just additional support, usually a push-in or a pull-out model depending on the student. Those need spaces in every one of our schools. That's elementary, middle, and high school need spaces in order to do that. They're typically not full classrooms. They're typically spots. Spots. Or they're sharing 1 room and 3 people are sharing it and things like that. So they don't have like their own classroom, but they have a space. In Hamilton, it's also a converted copy room. So did that answer kind of what you're talking about?
Yeah,
When you're talking
and-
about 6, this includes preschool. So our preschool is predominantly here right now. It's predominantly here to support our students with special needs. And we have 3.5 inclusion classrooms. Those are students, we can't have any more than 7 students with special needs and 8 community peers. And then we have 1.5 more direct instruction programs. That was particularly designed for this current school year to meet the significant needs of students that are in those programs. So those are students that they're not community peers necessarily mixed into those rooms. The 3-year-old program is Monday through Thursday in the morning, and then a 4-year-old program is all day, Monday through Friday, but they have a half day in the morning off on Friday so that our preschool teachers can have planning time and the things that other teachers get throughout their day. That's very hard to do in preschool when you're running 2 sessions at the same time. So those programs all support that, and that the 6th classroom is the Positive Pathways classroom, the one that we moved from DA, and what we propose to move other programs from DA to Fish and Cove if possible.
Thank you, but right, Ms. Hitchner, right, we have a lot of space at Stony Lane, I know, that's dedicated to
Yeah,
things that are not just
Oh, regular.
gen
Yeah.
ed classrooms.
Yeah, keep in mind also, all of our buildings have occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy takes up quite a bit of space. All of our schools need to have those locations to provide those services to kids. And again, they're typically not classrooms, but they are office spaces or partial corners. I don't know, wherever spot that we can do that's reasonable, they will be there.
So just from a community perspective, a parent, I'm trying to figure this out too. In my head, my husband and I were crunching numbers this weekend. I told Dr. Duga, I'm really trying to figure this out. So I thought to myself, well, we have this building capacity, and I would have to assume that the planners 3, 4, 5 decades ago thought, okay, well, let's plan a building that's big enough for people, for there to be room to grow as the community grows. And I said, well, I don't understand, why wouldn't they have built buildings big enough? And then it kind of clicked. What didn't we have 50, 40, 30 years ago, 5 years ago, that we have now? And there's a lot more need. There are a lot more, there are a lot more special education programs. There are a lot more needs, OT, PT, that now take, need space as well. And that's something that, honestly, I didn't even think about until this weekend. So I'm just throwing that out there to the community, that maybe that isn't something that's crossed everybody's mind, that we have to now provide space for things that, years ago we did not have to, the space was not needed for that. So you had bigger classrooms, you had more space in each classroom. Now the classrooms are separated out. Over at Stony Lane, things are divided by dividers. Like one space is divided into thirds by a divider, because remember, we don't have walls yet. So just something to keep in mind as, you kind of wonder, I don't understand how we're crowded. Well, that does add to, some pressure to figure out where we're supposed to put everyone.
I just want to go back to the Fishing Cove number, because the Fishing Cove number is missing the preschool number. So the total is 346 at Fishing Cove, and the utilization of the building is 98%. So just note that on your paper, the preschool should have a number of 87 there, and it's not there. At Forest Park, we'll just look at each of these schools. At Forest Park, the total population is 265 students. That is a K through 5 school. Every grade level but grade 1 has 2 teachers. Grade 1 has 3 teachers. So you can see the breakdown of what the teachers to ratio is there. The utilization of that building is 102%. And in that building, we also have 2 special education programs there that Dr. Sancher was talking about. At Hamilton, the capacity is, the current enrollment is 444, aspirational capacity of 395. Our utilization of that building is 112%. We have 2 special education programs that are there that are, district programs. And when we note these special education programs, they're all district programs based on needs of students. And we place them throughout the district, try to place them based on where we believe students are coming from, but it could be a student from anywhere in the district that needs that specific program. And we also know at Hamilton, as we said, copy rooms have been converted for resource rooms. We have a current first grade classroom that is shared with a reading specialist. These are not ideal situations. Again, why we're looking at this, of how we can better utilize our schools, which does result in us having this conversation of redistricting. At Quinnesset, the current enrollment is 216, aspirational capacity of 307. Utilization of that building is at 70% right now, and we have 1 district special education program that is there. So again, this is why we're looking at our schools, and the reason why we're looking at shifting neighborhoods from the south to the north to be able to use our schools in a better way. Stony Lane, current enrollment is 384. K-5 school, there are 5 kindergarten classrooms at Stony Lane. That school has the most K classrooms because we had to add K classrooms as because of overages coming from Hamilton. As I said earlier, that school had the space and also transportation-wise was closest to the Hamilton area with a school that has space. The utilization of Stony Lane is at 92%, and there is one district special education program at Stony Lane. As we talk about the schools, some schools have enclosed classrooms, some schools don't, Stony Lane and Knesset don't, so you're able to remove those dividers to increase utilization, increase the number of classrooms, spaces, or learning spaces that you have. The other thing we also want to consider in this, when we're thinking about our special education programs, it's important to note that if they are specialized programs, those students are also in the regular education classroom as well. So you have a program there for them, but they also are included, if it's a grade 1, grade 2, in with their grade 1, grade 2 typical peers and part of that classroom as well.
The other thing
to note too about our current situation, our current enrollment and looking at the schools and programming is Title I as well. We have Knesset Elementary School that is a full Title I school. We have Fishing Cove that's a targeted Title I school. Lydia, I'll pass the microphone. Maybe you can just briefly explain what Title I is and how we receive, what is the, not specific formula, but what is factored in to the eligibility of a school becoming Title I and those resources going to that school, between a school-wide school and a targeted Title I school.
Okay, so, I hate microphones. So, as Dr. Duber just said, we have 2 schools that receive Title I funds in North Kingstown. These are funds that come to the district. They're federal funds that are determined by the number of students in the North Kingstown area that qualify for free or reduced lunch. We choose to concentrate those funds in our elementary schools for the 2 schools that have the highest number of students enrolled to qualify for free and reduced lunch. If a school has more than 40% of the students enrolled to qualify for free or reduced lunch, you can have what's called a school-wide program. And what that means is that the funds that are directed to the school are used to benefit any student who would benefit from them. The goal is to close achievement gaps. So while poverty is what brings money to the door, how that money is used is determined by academic need. So you can have the wealthiest families in the school benefiting from the Title I resources. So in a school-wide program, we at Knesset, for example, the funds are used to support professional development for the staff. We have a full-time social worker who's made full-time using Title I funds. We also have additional interventionists. So when we think about space, we have 3 interventionists who are paid fully or in part through Title I funds. So these are all great resources for the students to help, again, close that achievement gap. A targeted assisted program means we identify a target kind of demographic in terms of where we are directing those funds. So the participating families at Fishing Cove, we've seen that the best way to use those funds is to focus them on those K-2 students who have the greatest academic needs in math and ELA. So Fishing Cove has an additional full-time interventionist who works with students who need help to reach benchmarks. So that is how we operate the targeted assistance program. I don't know if there's more, does that give, does anybody have a specific question about how Title I works? Every year we come up with a plan in terms of how we are to using the funds. The amount we get each year is determined by how much RIDE gets, and then it trickles down to us, and The amount we get, again, is determined by poverty numbers across the entire district, including those students who we look at, those students who are aware of, who attend private schools but reside in North Kingstown. So those numbers also impact our allocation.
Lydia, when you say we determine, can you explain who is involved in that decision-making process? Do you include teachers at Quidnesset as well?
Yeah, so in terms of how we use the funds?
Yes.
So each year we do lots of different strategies. So the school improvement team's plan is part of what makes that determination as to how we will use funds. But then we also survey families, we do different strategies to get input from both families as well as teachers. So we survey teachers, we survey families, and we engage with the school improvement team. We being me, I suppose. I'm a very, but yeah, so there's a lot of conversations that happen in smaller teams, like with the principal and some of the Title I funded staff, as well as with the larger school communities, and then also with the parents.
Okay, one more question, and this is just for education purposes.
Yeah.
Could you just give us a quick overview of the SATs, the SIT teams, because I know you just mentioned them, but
Yeah.
I don't know if the parents realize that that's another way to be involved
Yeah.
in each school.
So I'll say what I have to say, but I'm sure that,
I can jump out.
again, yeah, okay.
So school improvement teams, every school has a school improvement team. They consist of a variety of people, including teacher, staff, thank you. So they include teachers and staff, they include the building principal, obviously, families, community members, and students. So really anybody, school improvement teams are set up intentionally to have diverse representation of different perspectives around the table. And the goal of the school improvement team is really to establish the goals for the school, the measurable goals that we're striving to achieve. And they really serve as kind of the driving, it's really the driving outcomes that the school is hoping to improve upon. And so every school's, there might be some uniqueness, but there's definitely going to be consistency among schools because they are guided by what's called our district strategic plan, which is established at the district level through the same type of process, and that's something that is approved through the Department of Education. So again, it's based on factors like student achievement, closing achievement gaps, school safety, culture, social emotional learning. It's based on certain initiatives that are aimed to bring about improvements in outcomes. There's facilities aspects to school improvement goals. So it's really an all-encompassing document that serves as the really the guiding goals for the school that drive decision making, drive resource allocation, budgeting, scheduling decisions, so on and so forth. Does that help?
Yeah. I hope that helps.
Can I ask one question in terms of Title I funding? With a shift in redistricting, how will that impact Title I funds?
So the amount of funds that we get as a district won't be impacted because that has to do with the town's low-income numbers among school-aged children. But in terms of, there would have to be, because of the percentage of free reduced lunch numbers currently at Quidnesset, there would have to be a substantial change at Quidnesset to make it ineligible for that 40% threshold for a school-wide program. Fishing Cove, the way, I don't think I said that to be a targeted assistance program, there's a couple of measures that you can use to determine a targeted eligibility. But generally speaking, it's if the poverty numbers or the free reduced lunch numbers exceed the grade span average. So we'll look at an elementary grade span average, and Fishing Cove and Quidnesset's free reduced lunch numbers are greater than the average of them all. Fishing Cove is below 40%. Obviously, that's a number we'll watch because when you're below 40%, it's not like everybody else is at, zero. That's a number that I'll be looking at based on the decision. But, so in terms of the total money, that's not gonna be impacted. I highly doubt any changes would impact Quidnesset. Fishing Cove is something to watch.
And that's what, I'll just kind of jump in with that, 'cause that's more budgetary decisions that we would make at a, administrative level along with the school committee. So we know that when we change populations, right, those numbers will go into the formulas, and it all goes into the CRP, which is the Consolidated Resource Plan, and doing the Title I grant, and looking at school levels. So as the population changes at Fishing Cove, and if population moves because it's a targeted school, we would know that, okay, that school potentially may not be a Title I targeted school after a possible redistricting if we do that. So then, what we would look at and say, well, what are the needs in the school? And that would go back to budgetary decisions that we would make. Because what potentially, theoretically, could happen is there's a shift, right? So our shift in funding, the total funds of the district wouldn't change, but it could be a shift. And what we know that shift would end up being, and if it's not Fishing Cove, it would be Davisville Middle School, based by population of what we know and based on free and reduced lunch. So the money shifts. So your Title I money now would go from Fishing Cove to Davisville Middle School, and what we would do is budgetary look at how we are using those funds. And looking at where the needs are. There may still be a need at Fishing Cove for intervention, right? I mean, there's always gonna be that need. It may not be covered through Title I funds, but it then becomes covered through our operational budget, and that's, budgeting that we do. That wouldn't happen until a few years out after your redistricting, because you're always doing your Title I, your CRP applications happen in the spring of the prior school year. So depending on when the redistricting happens, or I say when, I don't want to, when that happens, right, the Title I impact wouldn't be until 2 years out, which gives us plenty of time to kind of plan and budget what might those needs be, and then where's the money shifting to. But we would have to do a major change at Quidnesset for that not to be a Title I school. And even looking at, what we're looking as possible redistricting would not impact the school. So, those are the numbers, that's everything we look at. In addition to what we are looking at in our numbers and projections, and we have 2 other sheets here to look at projections, we'll get to that. We also consider housing developments. So, we have that information from the town. We know where there are new either apartments going up, housing developments going up, and have that to consider. And that is considered, that is a variable that is considered in our decisions as we start looking at this, right? And I think that's why when we started looking at this and saying, okay, well, we have to shift neighborhoods, and we're looking at shifting neighborhoods from the south north and some from the Hamilton area to the Fishing Cove area to the Quidnesset area. We were looking at Reynolds Farm because that neighborhood is on the outskirts of Fishing Cove. It's a growing neighborhood. We know there are 74 more housing developments coming in the next few years. We know that population is going to grow. That's why we're looking at that area going to Quidnesset. It's also the closest neighborhood to another school. So as we're looking at this, we're looking at neighborhoods that are close to other schools and making that move, because we also want to consider distance. So, the reason why we're looking at Reynolds Farm as a possible neighborhood to move is because that's still growing. And looking at Quidnesset, we know there's space there. Looking at the information that we have, we also, over the next few weeks, will be receiving new projections that we have put together, and that we'll receive in the next few weeks. So that'll be more data that we'll have that we can look at and consider to be considered within this decision of, what are the recommendations that we're going to make to the school committee. And we know we have a timeline that was put together, back when this committee was put together, of getting information to them for April. We may not make that, it's okay, right? I mean, I think we all know we need to be flexible. I think it's important the public know we are not in a rush. as it may come across as we look at this information. There's a lot of information that we need to look at. There are different scenarios, and every time we look at a different scenario, I want the public to know, don't take that as, oh my God, that's what they're doing, right? We are looking at this, we're trying to decide what will be the best situation. And as we look through things, oh, let's look at scenario A, let's look at scenario B, let's look, whatever that is, that's because we want to look deeper into that. And at the last meeting, I said I'd come back to this meeting tonight with another scenario that kind of looks a little deeper at the neighborhoods we're looking at. And you know, the reason why we're looking at the neighborhoods we're looking at is because they are the closest neighborhoods to other schools. So for example, Hamilton, the area around Daniel Drive and Nantucket going into Wickford, those neighborhoods right there are the closest neighborhoods to Fishing Cove, and also next to other neighborhoods that already go to Fishing Cove, and there's school buses in that area that are already traveling there, picking up students to go to Fishing Cove. That's why we're looking at those areas. It's not because we just decided, let's, you know, throw a pin at a map or something. I mean, we're strategically looking. We're not gonna move families that are in walking distance to a school, right? I think that was a big thing that came out from the last meeting. They're looking, you know, they're considering this, they're looking at this. We're just looking at neighborhoods, we're looking at the numbers, we're trying to start somewhere. And unfortunately, from the last meeting, that went across social media, and everyone took what was on social media as the decisions that we're making. Please be careful. Like, don't just take what we're looking at and what someone puts on social media, because what happened, it's a rumor mill, right? Think about like when we were in elementary school, the phone game. That's what's happening right now, right? One person says something, another person, and then all of a sudden it's becoming that's what they're doing when we don't even have a recommendation to put forward right now. We're not near putting forward a recommendation. We're still in the stage of looking, and we're listening to what the community is hearing. We heard everyone getting upset. Why would you move me? I live right near the school. We're not moving you. We would never put that forward. We would never, I personally would never put forward a recommendation to the school committee where we're gonna take someone that can walk to a school or within walking distance or right there and say, we're going to move you somewhere else, right? That just doesn't make sense. We're just trying to look at the map, right? So I have another, another highlight, the area of like kind of where we're looking. It doesn't include anyone that is walking distance, but we are still in that analysis stage of looking at neighborhoods that are near the closest to Fishing Cove, that are near neighborhoods that currently go to Fishing Cove, and in the past many years ago were either Wickford or Fishing Cove, right? I mean, you've got to think historically too. I've been part of this town for 24 years, either as a teacher back in early 2000, as a parent. I've been part of these redistricting scenarios before. It takes time, right? We are not in a rush. We did have to put a timeline together. We may not follow that timeline, and that's okay. We may not have a decision for next year, and that's okay. But what we do need to have is some type of solution or something that we're gonna be working with, that this advisory committee needs to put forward to the school committee to consider, because we're already looking at the numbers. Kindergarten, we're already over capped for K at Hamilton. This is March. And we already have kids that are on a waiting list that unfortunately will not be going to Hamilton and are gonna have to go somewhere else. We have 5 K classrooms at Stony Lane. That's a lot to be at one building. I don't know if they're gonna be at Stony Lane yet because all our registrations aren't in. I think we're at 198 numbers on there of current K registrations. We have currently 197 kids registered for K. We know our projection, which is an estimate, and that can change, is 266. We don't know where that delta is and where they live. We don't have that info. That's not something we can get. We know birth rates, we know how many kids through child outreach there are, we know how many through KidsNet, how many 3-year-olds there are, we know how many 4-year-olds there are in district. That's the information we have. We don't have by neighborhood. We don't get that information. We just know from KidsNet how many 3-year-olds are in town, how many 4-year-olds are in town. And even at that, it can change because that information comes from your pediatrician. So let's think of it like military families. When I was in Jamestown, it was really hard to look at enrollment because we had a lot of military families. So, or people move. So if you come and the last information that the pediatrician had that they sent to KidsNet at RIDE was that you were a North Kingstown resident, but now you live in Warwick, we don't get that information. That number is still there, right? So that 266 could really be 260, or it could be 300. we don't know until everyone is registered, right? That's, unfortunately, that's something that school districts deal with, these estimates. So right now, we know, and what we're looking at is 197 registered K kids. They're in the schools they are in, based on getting those registrations. And we know right now at Stony Lane, if we turn to that next page, that is our current, those are the kids that we know right now that are in our schools. Those are new registrations, anywhere from K to 5, all our kindergartners, and the kids we have right now. That's if everyone just stays where they are. We are not going to accept any voluntary transfers. We're not going to involuntary transfer anyone. We're just going to leave people where they are. Right? We'll have a total of, right now, 1,497 elementary kids. That does not include all our K kids, because it's just who's registered. We know K can possibly go up to 266. If you look at Stony Lane, just as an example, Stony Lane for kindergarten, we have currently 36 students registered for K at Stony. We know that number's going to grow just by historically knowing in that area. We have 5 K teachers there right now. 5 K teachers may not stay at Stony Lane. We might be looking at this in June, July, and saying, all right, we only need 4, but if we look at this, we already know Fishing Cove needs another kindergarten classroom, based on what we have, right? So this is the data that we have and us making decisions. We can't make that decision right now because it's too soon, because we don't have all the registrations. So around June, July, that's when we may have to make some shifts with our teachers and where they may be placed. We try to make that decision in June, so that way we can place our teachers where they need to be before school year ends. Sometimes that doesn't happen best until July, and that happened last year with us adding classrooms. So there definitely will be a shift with K classrooms and where they're placed across the district, based on all of our registrations once we get them, and we won't know best really until June, until it comes closer. I mean, we're gonna send some emails out and put stuff out on social media and say, please register by, give a certain date to kind of get people to register. Hamilton did a great job. Thank you. Hamilton has the most registrations right now, so thank you for getting those in, because that helps us. That helps us in making decisions. Unfortunately, I think that happened because of a scare, maybe, of what we're talking about. But thank you for registering, because that helps us make those decisions. We need to get everyone else in the community to register as well, so we can look and see where shifts may need to happen with our kindergarten classrooms. So there's a lot that goes into it. We heard a lot from families, mainly from Hamilton and Fishing Cove, about concerns about moving and impacts on academics and social emotional development, and we are aware of that. We also need to consider what we need to do its best within the schools for everyone too. I'm also going to say something, and I don't want to take it the wrong way at all, but this redistricting conversation is causing neighborhoods to pit against neighborhoods, schools to pit against schools, and that needs to stop. As the superintendent of schools, we need to do this respectfully. And some of the emails I'm getting, I read it, and I'm embarrassed by comments that people are saying. I'm embarrassed by what people are saying about Knesset, that I don't want my children with those children. I would never say that as a parent. I taught at Knesset years ago. We have teachers on this committee, people representing Knesset. They are people, they are students. Would you want your students, your children to be talked about that way? For people to say, I want to be at the best school and Knesset is not, I'm going to take a minute to talk about ratings and how that happens. But you are talking about other people's children when you make comments like that. And I am asking this community to please have grace during this. These are not easy decisions we're making. And some of the comments I'm getting, I'll take the comments, being called a crackpot. You know what? It comes with the job. But when you start talking about children and other families, and I'm getting emails from Knesset families saying, we don't want them. Leave our little school alone. We're happy. That's a disgrace to this community. We need to work together. And I'm happy that you are all out here listening to what we're talking about and sharing feedback, because constructive feedback is important in this process. When you put other people down in the process and children, that's where it's embarrassing for this town. And I'm just asking for that to stop and for us to think of other people in this process of what we have to do. Quinnesset's a great school, and unfortunately, we have a rating system in Rhode Island that does not truly tell you how a school is. So our star ratings that come from the Department of Education, you get a rating in different areas based on academics, attendance by students, attendance by teachers, academics from state assessments. State assessments, that is an assessment that happens 1 year, one data point, okay? And when that's all put together, the actual star rating you get is the lowest star you get of all the different areas. North Kingstown High School was rated as a 2 a few years ago because of one category, right? We worked hard and brought that up, and now North Kingstown High School has a higher rating. Is our North Kingstown High School really a 2? Look around here. No. But unfortunately, in the state, the Department of Education, how they do that rating, and they come right and tell you, you are the lowest rating of, you are based by the lowest star rating you get. It doesn't matter how many 3s and 4s you have. You need to look at it. Look at how many 3s and 4s there may be in a school. Unfortunately, they then say, okay, well, you're a 2 in this category, so you're a 2. That's how those ratings happen. So when you look at that and say, well, Quinnesset's not as rated as high as Fishing Cove or Hamilton or Stony or Forest Park, you gotta really dig into that data and really look at it. And I ask you, and the principal goes, it's like, you wanna see the school, let's go visit the school, right? Don't make judgments, because at some point, I think there will be a recommendation out there of us having to shift neighborhoods to Quinnesset. There's space there, right? And as we put other neighborhoods there, you become part of that community, right? And you really live in the school. So I'm gonna stop there, but I had to say that because it was, we need to be together as a community here. And in my 24 years of being part of this community, either as a teacher or as a resident, it's just, we can do better, all of us. I can do better, right? We all can do better, and that's what we need to do within this process. So, is there anyone else from the community that wants to say anything about the data, the feedback received, kind of process where we're at?
I did want to just mention one thing, you can hear me. I just wanted to say one thing about one of the other reasons that Ken, you had mentioned, like the shifting. And one of the important things that we were looking at was to make sure that where children are going to their current middle school, they are staying at their middle school. And I think that's one thing that we haven't revisited again. I think that was at an earlier meeting, and it wasn't at the one that's been posted. So that is one thing that we looked at to make sure that all of these children that are being redistricted into a different elementary school, they're still going to the same middle school that they would be going to.
Oh, just quick. I can project. I'll project. My best. I'm trying to put myself in the seat or the ears of parents and people in this meeting, and you keep hearing special ed, need, well, why is that? What are our numbers, things like that. And I figure I would just share that, because I think that'd be a question I have, right? So we are almost 100 more students than 2019 that are in special ed. There's a couple of reasons for that. COVID did do a little hit for kids with learning disabilities, so we do have a slight increase in those areas. Those are areas that our teens in school do the eligibility for. But then there's some other eligibilities that we don't really have control over because it has to do with how the child was born. And these are things like kids on the autism spectrum. We have a spike in that particular population. We have a spike with kids with intellectual disabilities and multiple disabilities. So those are things that, yes, we have the students, but our teams are not like overinflating those numbers. They just exist, okay? Everything else is maintaining very stable numbers as far as essentially the same amount of kids who are in general receiving speech language or otherwise health impaired or things along these lines. So that increase of numbers is not just the numbers, it's the intensity of need. Where when I've been a director for over 20 years now, and I was a director for you guys a decade ago. And what I was really working with kids with more learning disabilities, yeah, we had some kids with more significant needs, but it's nowhere what it's like today. And this is not a North Kingstown issue, this is not a state issue, this is a nationwide issue. So you may say, well, we don't, hopefully you're not thinking this, but why do we need to have these special ed kids in our schools? I heard people complaining about their taxes. If you'd like your taxes to significantly increase, we can start sending these kids out to district placements, which start at 65 grand a year. So just to give you an idea that we can't just, and not only that, they deserve to be in our communities, they deserve to be with our students, they do deserve to be included, and more than included, they belong here. And that is what, the reason why I came back to this district, was to increase our programming. When I walked in, the middle school programming was essentially decimated. There was resource and one life skill class, and that is it. And that was not enough to support our kids in order for them to get out of high school and do what they need to do and be able to graduate and, you know, give back to the community in any way that they possibly can. So I just want to be super clear about that. And I concur the comments regarding about different types of populations of students. Just shows me that you have not been in our schools, you have not seen the dedication of the teachers, the high quality of our teachers. If you look at longevity of teachers, look at the schools where they're staying at. There's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. And I really hope that we can have grace and respect for each other as we walk through this. It is a huge job. And when we're thinking, at least from my lens, I'm trying to look at how do we meet the needs of all kids. It's not just special ed. How do I support all kids in the services that they need? And do that in a way that is not overwhelming one school, that's not overwhelming one group of team, one group. You know, we have to do this in really careful ways in order to support our kids.
Kenny, can I ask a quick question? At a previous meeting, you had mentioned that one of the long-term goals, not necessarily for the coming year, is to have the elementary school enrollments lead to a single, feeder to a single middle school. Do you mind, is that like a best practice, or is that, I'm just curious about that?
So when, it goes back to the conversations in our planning for the middle schools and building a new Whitford Middle School. So what our vision and hope and goal is that once the new Whitford Middle School is built, that we then can say, okay, and what we're looking at, just to be fully transparent, is Hamilton and Fishing Cove goes to Whitford, and Forest Park and Stony Lane and Quinnesset goes to Davisville. Right now, Fishing Cove is split, right? We want to be able to have a plan in place and scenarios where kids get to stay together. You know, you go to elementary school with all your friends, you go to the same middle school, and eventually everyone's at high school. So that's kind of like where we're moving towards, and that's what we want to be put in place. But realistically, we're waiting until the new school is built, so that at that point we can. So in our process now of looking at the elementary schools, we're also making sure too that any of these shifts we make is not going to impact where you would go to middle school. And we're not going to shift neighborhoods and say, okay, well, you were going to Davis, so now you're going to Whitford, or vice versa, right? We're making these moves so that way the elementary school may change right now, but you're still going to the same middle school.
But the option of having like a neighborhood move to like a elementary school that would then be split, we're still moving.
Our plan is for that not to happen once the new Whitford Middle School is open.
Okay.
So even in design and thinking of enrollment, we're considering all, those numbers, right? What would, if you look at it, and somebody said, well, why are you doing those two and those three? We have 5 schools, right? So unfortunately, it has to be 2 and 3. And Davisville Middle School is a larger building, a larger school, and it's going to be larger even after the new Whitford Middle School is built, right? Based on square footage and what we're planning. So, Whitford Middle School, essentially will be smaller footprint than DMS and would be smaller population that's going there. The spreadsheet that we look at the current, the projections for 25-26. So we do have 2 other spreadsheets, but before I get there, we do have an item on here about modular classrooms. So we did hear that as a suggestion from a lot of people of, why wouldn't you just put modular classrooms out there? That came up in conversation 2 years ago before I was here as superintendent, actually kind of coming in. And during that time, it was a different superintendent, different interim, different administration. And they had shared with me prior to coming here, the concerns at Hamilton of having to, put art out, use the art classroom as a K classroom, all this. And even at that time, there was a lot of feedback, please don't do that to our school. We don't want you to take away the art classroom. We don't want you to do this. There was mention of modular classrooms. People didn't want modular classrooms. 2 years later, now the suggestion is modular classrooms. So I just want to kind of put that out there, of like kind of that pendulum swinging of there's going to be decisions we have to make, right, as a school district. We can't make everyone happy 100%. But we need to make the best decision for the schools, for the students, for the community. Maybe modular classrooms is the answer. I know a few years ago, people were against the modular classrooms, they didn't want them. We will look, I'm getting quotes just to be able to see what the cost would be. But there are other concerns we have to consider with bringing in modular classrooms and safety as well. So I did want to put out there, we heard people with that suggestion. We are going to look into it, get some quotes, and see what that cost will be. That'll be an additional cost for the district, and then have to, be budgeted for. And then we will also look at the pros and cons of modular classrooms, because then you get into, okay, well, who's going out there? What grade level is going out there? Is it a special ed, does it mean like music or art or library? Like, who, and you have to look at the safety features as well, and where on the campus would it go? I know a lot of people came out and said, hey, we'll come out with our hammers, and thank you for being willing to come out and do that, right? But we also have to look at the campus and where can it go? Is it even feasible to put modular classrooms on the campus? So there's a lot that has to be considered, and we will definitely look into that, and we're getting some quotes to see what the cost will be. So we are, listening to that feedback, and there are other suggestions that might be brought forward that not things we can do, but as district administration, we are looking at and listening, and we are taking our time, and the decision might be that we're not making a recommendation for next year. But as we look at our current enrollment and projections for next year, I think everyone, the committee will see, we need to come up with some type of plan, because we're already over cap in some classrooms, and it's only March for next year. So the next item here is to review some additional scenarios, really just two that we're looking at for tonight. The first one is just looking at currently where we are. It's really not a scenario, it's just current enrollment that we have. It's updated with the K registrations that we've received. And the special education programs are where they are. I think it's important to note that we've been also having conversations about moving to preschool. That is a completely separate decision process from redistricting, but we have been talking, and we've been talking at the school committee level, and part of the budget process is moving the preschool out of Fishing Cove and being put at Davisville Academy, because we need expansion. We need more room for the preschool. The preschool is growing. We know we have students coming in. There's needs around special education. And there's also hopes that we can grow the preschool to have offer more preschool programs for our community, for typical peers, not just students with special needs. We know if we keep it Fishing Cove, we really can't have it grow there, because there isn't enough space at Fishing Cove to do that. Sorry, I didn't mean to yell, it's just this microphone keeps going in and out. So, we have put that proposal forward to school committee to move the preschool to Davisville Academy. Davisville Academy currently houses some of our special education programs, but we're also trying to move those special education programs back into the elementary schools where they belong, because those kids are isolated, and that's not right. That's not how we should be doing that. So we are slowly taking the elementary programs and moving them, our middle school programs and moving them, and that way the building can be used for our preschool, and eventually we can add more preschool classrooms. So that is something that we've presented to the school committee. We're waiting for approval, but the plan is to move the preschool for next year to Davisville. In doing so, that would open up 5 classrooms at Fishing Cove. Those 5 classrooms, we also put in the proposal of how they're going to be used. So, we have one positive pathways program at Fishing Cove, and we're looking at moving the other elementary programs that are there. Part of what we're doing is looking at the district special education programs we have, keeping them all in the same building for continuum of services, and that way the students are staying in that building, not having to move. okay, 1 year I'm in kindergarten at Fishing Cove, the next year the 1-2 programs at Stony Lane, and there's that shift. So the plan is, and you see it in the numbers here, that there would be 2 more rooms being used at Fishing Cove for the Positive Pathways, a K program, and then a grade 1-2 program, and you have your grade 3-4-5 program. That would then leave 3 more classrooms open, and in talking with the principal of the school, we know they're asking for more space, because they're trying to, I'm gonna use the word breathe, right? So they would want to use it for, might be speech or OT, or sensory, or it could be other teachers that we have that are not classroom teachers. So it doesn't just automatically open up 5 rooms to be used for the other classrooms, but it would be used for purposes within the school. So just to keep that in mind. And then looking at our current projection for Fishing Cove, we can already see we're at cap for K. So one of those also most likely, right, just kind of looking at that number today, be another K classroom. Could change, right? Something could shift, but that's kind of what we're looking at. We're also over by 2 in grade 5 at Fishing Cove. Forest Park, looking at what we currently have. And again, remember, we don't have all the K registrations. So when you look at Forest Park, there's only 32 students registered for K right now. And, there's still a little bit more room. We have 2 Ks there. So we would have 2 Ks, 2 first grades, looking at the shift of students moving up, 3 second grades, 2 third grades, 2 fourth grades, and 2 fifth grades. And you can see how many seats are remaining. And we're close right now in grade 3 and grade 4. Looking at, currently 251 students. At Hamilton, we have 64 students registered for K. So we are already over by 7 students. So we look at, the students over, consider a waiting list. Unfortunately, there is no space there to add another classroom. So like Fishing Cove, we can't. Hamilton, we can't. There's not a single space unless we're gonna convert more storage spaces, which obviously we're not gonna do, that's not ideal. So again, this is why we are looking at having to make these shifts, because we don't have space in the school, and having to shift neighborhoods north to be able to look at using spaces in other schools. We would have 3 first grades, 4 second grades, 3 third grades, 4 fourth grades, and 3 fifth grades at Hamilton. At Quidnesset, we have 25 students right now registered for kindergarten. We would have 2 of each grade level, and there are seats open, more than 10 seats. Well, not in second grade has 9 seats, but more than 10 seats in all of the other grades currently open at Quidnesset. Then at Stony Lane, we have 36 students that are registered for K at Stony Lane. So obviously we're watching that because we don't need every classroom that's currently there, and looking at where the shift may need to be in the district. We're planning on having 3 first grades, 3 second grades, 3 third grades, 3 fourth, and 3 fifth grades. And right now, we'll be watching all of these numbers because some of our classroom spaces are high, and there could be a shift somewhere, as we get closer to the end of this school year. So that's the numbers that we have right now with current registrations, and registrations will change as the year goes on. And that's just putting everyone back in their schools, right? So this is any voluntary transfers we had, involuntary transfers, all put back at their school. So doing that, we're already looking at where we are tight in some classrooms. And it's not just about being tight in a classroom, but also the utilization of the building, meaning the actual learning spaces, what spaces we have for any expansion or making best scenario learning spaces for our students.
I was also, there's also an issue around recess and lunch. and the capacity to hold that many kids in those type of environments and spaces.
Any other comments from anyone else from the committee on the current registration and projections for next year? No. Okay. The next sheet, I said we come back with.
Sorry,
Yeah.
there was the initial talk of moving the pre-K classrooms, and there was the green light from Fishing Cove to Davisville. Is that still taking place?
Yeah, so I was talking.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No,
That's okay, don't worry about it. So I did mention that earlier, so we officially don't have the green light.
Oh, so
School committee
overall has to
improve your makeups of your schools, right? Your school makeups, where we have programs of how the buildings are used across the district. So budgetarily, the money in the budget to make any moves we have to do, like for any additional furniture, building a playground, we're building a playground at Davisville Academy for the preschool. So budgetarily, everything's in the budget. We still need the school committee to approve, saying, yes, we agree with you in moving that. That's something we're gonna need soon, because there's planning that we are doing, but like, we're kind of still waiting for that full approval from them. And, there's meetings we want to have, like, we're talking about wanting to have meetings with the families and be able to talk to them. It's kind of hard to do that without actually having that approval yet, so hopefully that'll be soon.
Hi, school committee member. I actually reached out today because they set the agendas around this time, usually like around, Dr. Earl and Dr. Duba get together. She's the chair of the school committee, and they set the agenda for the following meeting. Our next meeting is Tuesday, March 18th. So I did, and anyone can ask for something to be put on the agenda. So this morning I emailed and I asked for this Davisville Academy move to be put on the agenda. Dr. Earl responded, I don't know if you saw the email. She said, okay, Dr. Duba hasn't seen it yet. Dr. Earl said, yes, I will put it on. So that's what I got to share with y'all.
Thank you. So normally we don't kind of go back, we kind of wait. Is it something you can wait for public comment, or?
I just have some questions about the utilization rate, so I can wait for public comment.
So the utilization rate is,
My specific question
Yeah.
is, why does RIDE do the utilization rate at 95% of the aspirational goal versus the functional capacity of the building?
so your functional capacity is just looking purely at square footage and how many kids can be in the building. Your aspirational is more looking at like best usage. We also have to consider our caps. So looking at the aspirational, that was a calculation I made based on, we look at aspirational, what would 95% be of that? I could have done 95% of the functional. That was just a choice I made because we were looking at aspirational.
Okay.
But the 95%, that is something that the state uses, saying elementary schools should be at 95% utilization. Now, Brian, do you have, just from working at Rye, like a reasoning, like maybe where that number actually came from, or?
Yeah, it's just a target range for that, so it's just to fall within that range, because you want to maximize the spaces that you currently have inside of the school building.
But RIDE's recommendation is 90% of the functional capacity, not the aspirational capacity, if I'm understanding RIDE's expectation. Correct. Because the way that this is broken out, and I'm just asking, because I think this is good stuff to consider, the way that this is broken out, Hamilton could be at 456 kids of, that would be 95% of the functional capacity. So I think that's an important distinction versus aspirational capacity that I think I heard is not a RIDE recommendation, is that correct?
Right, I don't believe the RIDE recommendation is using utilization based on the functional, and that we can check on if it's functional or aspirational.
Yeah, I just get clarity and bring it back to the next meeting.
Yeah, thank you. And just, when I was figuring out what our utilization, I was basing that based on our numbers, right? So what our capacity is and what the,
Like the teacher capacity and that stuff.
right, and based on our space too, right? So what do we have, right? So what's our current capacity? What is it? What is the capacity to be? And then also just knowing the building, right? Like there's also, when you think like utilization of the building, like, what do you have for space? Like, do you have any room space any other rooms that could be used, and, you know, some of the buildings we don't. So the last spreadsheet in this document, this goes off of some of the work we were looking at our last meeting. Right, so this is where I'm gonna kind of turn this over to the committee to kind of look at. I'm gonna stop talking and to look at this. So what we did, we took the area, and actually, let me put a map up here, because I think that would be helpful for us. So this is one of the maps we looked at our last meeting. I don't know if you guys have, when we passed out last time, but it's also, if you pull up on your computer, it's on the redistricting website. So these are the boundaries, your current boundary lines for Fishing Cove, and I just probably wanted to start there. So the red is Fishing Cove boundary lines, the neighborhoods that go to Fishing Cove. Purple are the current neighborhoods that go to Hamilton. So when we started looking and saying, okay, we're looking at areas to look at possibly moving, again, possibly, there's no final decision here. We looked at the neighborhoods that were close there. So when we look over here, right, this is the Daniel Drive area. It's right outside of other areas that are currently going to Fishing Cove. There's buses, a bus that goes through here, right? So that's why we looked there. The same as this area right here. So this is the area that would be kind of like northwest of like Fairway Drive. So this is off of Anaquatucket, leading into Tower Hill. These neighborhoods here and off down here with Prospect heading into Whitford. When Whitford was a school, when Whitford was open as a school, these neighborhoods would have been going to Whitford. These are the neighborhoods that are closest to other Fishing Cove neighborhoods where we currently have school buses going through this area. That's why we're looking at this and analyzing what would be the impact if these neighborhoods were moved from Hamilton to Fishing Cove. It does not include the neighborhoods up through here, so like Duck Cove, Bissell Cove, the area past Fairway Drive by the high school going up Anaquatucket towards Boston Neck Road. Those areas there, those are all some within walking distance. I know there's buses out there, but close to the Hamilton area. Those are not areas that we are looking at moving students. That's all right within the Hamilton area down through here. Another. And so here's Hamilton Road, Salisbury, right where the handprint is, the hand, that's where Hamilton is. This area here is all, we are not looking at that area as if moving from Hamilton. It's the neighborhoods here that are off other neighborhoods that currently are at Fishing Cove where we have buses that go to Fishing Cove. We're trying to look at if we're making shifts, neighborhoods that are near, closest to another school, where we know that there would be that area making that there's space, that buses travel through that area. So what you have in front of you to look at, now I'm gonna stop talking, would be the school, grade levels, number of students going to each school, if we made that shift of what we were looking at up here that was in purple, going to Fishing Cove, along with Reynolds Farm going to Quidnesset. As I said earlier, the reason why we're looking at Reynolds Farm, because it's on the outskirts of Fishing Cove. It's the closest neighborhood to Quidnesset Elementary School, And it's also a neighborhood that's growing, and we need to make sure that there's space within the school for that growth. So, this is here, your committee kind of look through that, kind of look at, see if you have any questions. As a show, this does not mean, this is not a recommendation going to the school committee. It's just, again, we're kind of looking and digging down and deeper and drilling into what we know of information.
Can you just, sorry, quickly clarify, because we can't see, but what road off of Pawtucket is the line now?
So Fairway Drive, so where Fairway Drive is, so the high school south stays at Hamilton.
But west, sorry.
The kind of that northwest area off, so when you are leaving the high school and you're at the corner of Fairway Drive and Pawtucket, so it's here, yes, yeah, so outside here. So if you go outside, so if you go down Fairway Drive and you take a right, that area is what we're looking at is considering moving to Fishing Cove, going to the right. If you go to the left, up towards the top,
Before it was Boston Ag, but now it's Fairway.
yes, we're using Fairway as the line.
Right.
That's, as an analysis, that's what we're doing. That is not, we're not saying that's the recommendation going forward, we're just saying that is what we are doing, so, yes.
But where the purple line is, it looks like it's going down Prospect, not Fairway.
So yes, so when you, Prospect would be part of the neighborhood that we moved to Fishing Cove.
As
That
well
area
as
off
like,
into
as
the-
well as like Lantern?
Yes.
Okay, which is east of Prospect, but west of Fairway. Okay, because I couldn't tell from there, so thank you.
That's mine is based on current, that's not.
So, yes.
This is where I need the public to be quiet, because this is a work session. Sorry, and I don't mean to come across rude, but when you all start talking, then we can't hear ourselves kind of talk here, and then you won't be able to hear what we're talking about. We're just gonna have a short conversation, and we'll move on to public comment, so it is getting late, but this is part of like the working meeting that we have to do.
I know in previous versions, we were trying to make sure the fifth graders stayed in place, so they wouldn't have to change in their final year, and I just want to confirm that's what's happening on this plan.
Yes, this
Great.
leaves current fourth graders at their current school going into fifth.
So they'll complete in fifth, and then, thank you.
And is this the 4+ that we had?
So this, I'm getting rid of the 1, 2, 3, 4, we are throwing all that out the window. This is, I put it as B just because we had the A, which is our current, like, projections, and this is, so essentially, this is where we left off, and I said we're gonna kind of dig deeper.
Okay, some of the math that you followed was a little bit different than option 4 last time, which makes it seem like it's what we previously were calling for.
Yes, I would say, yes, this is what we said we'd come back, kind of with that 4+. We're just gonna kind of remove all those numbers, so there's no confusion, and just, this is the, we'll call it letter B.
Cut positions, would that be assuming, I know there's bubble rooms at Hamilton, so would that be assuming that they no longer needed the bubble room for that grade level? Or would we still be having grade 2 with 4 classrooms and grade 4 with 4 classrooms? Where it says cut position?
Yeah, so with this projection here, grade 2 and grade 4, because if you look below where it says
Seats remaining, potentially you would have 3 grade 2s and 3 grade 4s, and then that would allow those spaces to be used for something else within the school. And it could be for resource, it could be intervention, whatever it may be. First grade wouldn't have to share with a reading specialist, so you would be able to expand within your school how the rooms are being used.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Forest Park to Quinnesset?
No, there's
No,
no,
this is
so
Forest Park is as it is.
this is leaving Forest Park as, there's no shift of moving neighborhoods from Forest Park.
Okay.
Because it just makes the school too small.
Mm-hmm.
When we looked at that, it was making the school too small by shifting families out of Forest Park.
I missed a meeting, I thought I wasn't here last week.
Okay, hi everybody. So for the advisory committee here, I'm gonna try to make this as easy as possible to explain. So let me kind of work backwards here. Because I looked into all this myself, I'm trying to really know where this all came from. So if you go back to a September meeting of last year, September 24th, 2024, school committee meeting, when it was a different school committee, when they decided to put this advisory committee together so that we could look at these issues, there was a comment made at the time that the charge would be to our committee, to our advisory committee, that we should come up with an idea by September of this coming school year, which is 25-26. Watching other school committee meetings, I did hear comments from that same school committee that said, oh, but we do understand that this is a heavy lift. So as a community member and now a school committee member, I was hearing two different opinions. So that being said, the reason I mention that is because when you do have a charge from a school committee, you are expected to basically bring recommendations forward that align with that charge. I'm going to assume that since there were kind of conflicting opinions on that, and the charge, which I have in front of me, is fairly open, I would like to make a recommendation. I don't know if I have to make an official motion, but it says here under the charge, short-term goals will be recommended for the 25-26 school year to address overcrowding in the elementary schools. Okay, so that's short-term goals. The next bullet point, long-term goals will be addressed to create a balanced enrollment and efficiencies across the district for all schools pre-K through 12. That is the longer-term goal, right, that we were trying to come up with. The other thing is that because this is a temporary advisory committee, it tends to be kind of like a one-year thing. So I'm gonna make two recommendations to the committee. And hear me out, and obviously I'm putting this out to you for the first time, so we're going to have to think on this, but I would like to recommend to bring forth to the school committee the idea that A, we do not make any decisions for this upcoming school year for September. Right at this point, I think it is a very shortened timeline. I know that the actual timeline that they presented at the school committee meeting last week says we would be making decisions in April and May and then letting parents know in June. I think we've all, after a lot of talk, decided that that's just way too soon. This is very complex and that we need to give more time to it. I did speak with Dr. Duba and I very bluntly said, what happens if we put everybody back in their home schools? You know, just give it to me straight. Are we in trouble? And I'll let Dr. Duba speak to that. The idea I got back from him was that it's not going to be pretty, but it's doable. And at this point, it may be the best option. The second piece I'd like to recommend, or ask us to consider recommending to the school committee, is that we extend this temporary advisory committee beyond just this year, and even beyond September or whenever it was formed. I think it was formed in October before I got on it. And we asked to bring it to at least the end of 2026 school year, 25-26 school year, so that we can continue doing the work that we've started here, but that we can take more time, seriously consider things like the demographic study that's coming out in a few weeks, and any other input, feedback, data that we might receive, while at the same time focusing on areas that, you know, Dr. Duba and I have said we are a little concerned about. The Reynolds Farm area, because we believe, in my opinion, I believe that the Hamilton area, the southern end of town, did see some increase in enrollment and kind of population explosion, but I don't necessarily know if that's going to expand out, you know, beyond the next few years. But we won't know that. We have to kind of wait and see. But we do know there is growth at Reynolds Farm and in that area. So that's something that we should probably take the time to look into and give ourselves time, give ourselves some breathing room. We've listened to all of this feedback, and like I said, we've been trying to come up with all these different scenarios. So again, I don't know if that's something the committee wants to consider. I would like it to be a two-part thing, for consideration to bring back to the school committee, extending this committee and then also not doing anything. But I'd like Dr. Juvit to explain, because there are consequences if we don't do anything in September. It's not gonna be like, oh, everybody gets to stay at their school and nothing's gonna change. So with the caveat that regardless of what we do or don't do, there are going to have to still be some difficult decisions. It's just kind of the path of least resistance at this point, so. But that's it.
So to answer your question, that if we do nothing for next year, meaning that we have this advisory committee continue into next school year, we do know that we have projections, new projections coming over the next few weeks for us to look at, and we just kind of leave everyone where they are. My thought on that is that if we're doing that, we don't accept any voluntary transfers, so which means, families that put in, I want to go from school A to school B because of such and such, they all get denied. And I would need the support from the school committee for that. And I say that because any parent appeal can go above me to the school committee. But that is, we have a policy about transfers and all of that. But it is up to the superintendent to accept or not accept those voluntary transfers. There may be some here and there that have special circumstances of why they need to be accepted, so it can't just be a, no, we're not accepting any. And again, it would also depend on if there's space in the schools. If we don't do any redistricting, we already know just by looking at this, there's going to be some classrooms that are already over, some classrooms that are close to being over at different schools. And based on registrations, I will have to make the decision to involuntarily transfer those students and families to another school, similar to what we've been doing for the past few years. I will say, when I came in here almost 2 years, well, a year and a half ago, families were very upset. There may be families in this room and families that are watching this that were part of that decision of, I'm sorry, yes, you bought a house in the Hamilton area, but we don't have space there for you, so you need to go to another school, like Stony Lane or Fishing Cove. Or the same might be at Fishing Cove. Yes, you bought a home in the area that's zoned for Fishing Cove, but just because you're zoned for that area, that doesn't mean that's where you go forever. Redistricting happens typically sometimes 5 to 6 years, and when we hit cap, we do have to look at other schools, because we look at it as a district, right? The school district is the entire town. Each school has neighborhoods that are zoned to go to that neighborhood, but when you reach cap, you then go to another school. Every school has the same curriculum. Most schools offer the same type of programs. I mean, Cohasset has a Title I, so there's additional services that are there. But overall, the same curriculum is taught in every single elementary school. And that would be something that to be considered. If we don't do this, then, there already will be, families that will be telling, you're going somewhere else. And that is something we have to look at, is where is that somewhere else, right? Like what school? Because it also impacts transportation. Because once we agree on an involuntary transfer, we also have to provide transportation. So that impacts transportation with our transportation fleet and buses, where they're going to bring children from one neighborhood school to another neighborhood school. And that's if the families accept the transportation or they decide to drive on their own. So just, looking at these numbers, if you look at it, I want to spend, more time of just looking and saying, okay, well, if we have to make the shift, where are they going? Right now we're looking at K. We don't have all the K registrations. We know that's a concern. Just kind of looking along this, we know that grade 3 across the district's a little bit of a concern, and grade 4. So those are the grade levels that we'd have to look at as possible areas that are close to cap and having to move and make a shift. We know in the contract, and this is also a recommendation, why don't you just pay the overages to the teachers? Well, that's not the way the contract works, right? We work with the union, and we know best practice also is trying to stick to those numbers that are in the contract. So that's something we have to consider as well in this. So if we do decide as an advisory committee, say, let's wait, let's not make a decision for next year, let's get the other projections that are coming in, and to be able to look at that, I think we need to kind of take some time to do so, if we do that, we just know there's ramifications for other families. And it might be families that are sitting in this room and families that are watching, that means, in the end, someone's moving, right? It might not be a neighborhood that's moving, but there's involuntary transfers that are going to have to happen no matter what if we don't do anything.
Are the involuntary transfers, would you say that they're consistent? Like if a student needs to be transferred in 3rd grade, would they be transferred again to that same school in 4th grade?
So that would depend on the population, right?
Okay.
So looking at it, a lot of times that does happen. So once you are transferred from one school because that grade is over, typically, yes, that's gonna continue because that same population is moving up. And so we always tell the families that if we can move you back to your home school, we will, but you may, have to go. Sometimes we also get to where the families moved, they said, well, we wanna stay here, we don't wanna go back to this, we just keep our child here. And that becomes part of a voluntary transfer.
Just real quick, because I know I'm taking a lot of time. Oh, God, yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think we signed on for 2-year term. Do other folks remember that for this
Okay,
committee?
that could have been my mistake.
Okay,
Just because I wasn't here when it first.
yeah, totally fair.
got initiated.
I do remember thinking, I wasn't sure if I was ready for 2 years, but I was gonna do it. So I think that we all signed on for 2 years. Yep, we're in it for the long haul. The other thing is, I hear what everyone's saying, and I'm wondering about if we can somehow find a compromise, which is that I think we would rather be intentional about the choices we're making than be backed into a corner. Certainly, there are going to be difficult decisions to make. Not everybody's going to be happy, but if we as a community can make an intentional choice, it means that we're not having to play defense and kind of respond in crisis mode. So as part of that, I hear what you're saying in terms of, putting off the decision. I'm not sure that's gonna serve any of us. And as you say, we're here as a community, right? We wanna support one another. So I wonder if there are 2 ways we can do that. One is talk about really realistically, how far can we push this deadline so we can keep collecting information. The other thing is I wonder if we can ask for voluntary registration for K ahead of time. We clearly have an amazing socially connected community here. So if we ask folks, can you register now? So we have those numbers. Maybe, I don't know if we can put in the request now. So we have those numbers. Not making any promises. Simply saying we are trying to do what we can intentionally for the best movement of this community. And we're in a sticky situation, and so giving everyone a little grace and a little wiggle room might mean we can do that on purpose.
So we are gonna send something out, so we did,
I did mention that earlier, I think it was before you got here, that we're gonna get an email out and put something out on social media with a deadline, a suggested deadline. We can't, we have to accept a rolling in registration, but just saying, please get out and register. And I was thanking the Hamilton families, because we got, they have the highest registration right now at Hamilton. And that helps us, and that's really appreciative of people going out and doing that, so then we know. So that is something we need to talk about earlier, getting an email out as long with just getting it on social media. And also word of mouth, right? That helps. Every parent, talking to every parent, saying, hey, make sure you register your child, or else may not be space at your school.
I just also wanted to make a quick announcement or statement about, I'm lost for words here, about the policy. I do know that that was also an issue that a lot of parents were writing in about, and I just wanted to let you know that the school committee does have a second read on that policy, and in looking through that policy, I also question whether or not the policy necessarily has to be approved before we decide upon anything, because some of those things, if you read through it, are actually, the policy language almost needs to come after the decision is made, or there were just a number of concerns I had myself looking at that policy. So it's not been approved yet, and it does have to go back to the school committee. So if you do have questions about it, please continue to send them in, and I know that I'm looking through them, your statements, your emails, and I know the other members are as well. So it's really important if you do have feedback on that, because we will be looking at it again.
Can I ask, are we still providing, given where we are in the conversation, are we still providing feedback or thoughts, reflections on the proposal you just laid out, or are we kind of past that? No, I just was curious if that's kind of not what we're talking about anymore.
No, we can. I think Megan was just trying to kind of put something out there as a something for us to
Yeah, yeah,
consider,
yeah,
so
yeah.
there's no motion on the table yet. So we can still talk about this and get feedback on what's here. So please share.
The only thing I wanted to reflect on, because I've been listening to a lot of stuff that's been said in the community. I listened to all those citizen comments at the school committee, that was long. And one of the things that I just wanted to be included in the consideration, that I kind of thought about, in listening to the comments, was that the area that you've reduced, this proposal reduces that off Annaquatucket neighborhood that would be shifting to Fishing Cove. But one of the things that I heard that resonated with me was the fact that that entire area, including the Prospect Street or Fairway and West, is a neighborhood that bikes to Hamilton or walks to Hamilton, and their support network, for many of them, is more foot and bike than areas farther away because of their proximity to the high school and to Hamilton. So that while a neighborhood farther away, say Hamilton, Alton, I'm just giving that as an example, they might be more car focused. In other words, they're not having a 15-year-old high schooler walk from high school to Hamilton and then take their child back home because there's nobody. Their network is not necessarily car dependent in the same way that some other neighborhoods are. And I know that we're working on buses and other things, but that was some commentary that I heard that I hadn't been thinking about that I wanted to share, which is just that that community that is small street, more safe, honestly, to bike and walk on than some other areas, and that's done so. I've seen the kids biking to Hamilton from that neighborhood. It's not just a disruption of, change, which happens, but some of those kind of routines don't exist for those families in the same way that they might exist for more car-dependent neighborhoods. Does that make sense? Okay. So
Yes, thank you for sharing.
I just wanted to share that because that resonated with me.
Any other comments or feedback?
The only one thing I noticed was at the information from B was at Hamilton, the second grade, is just over capped by one, so we would cut a classroom there, but one classroom would be over just by one student. So I just wanted to point that out. I didn't look at all the others, but focus on Hamilton.
Okay, so I'm just going to officially put a motion out there. Okay. In the very least, I think that we should recommend to the school committee that we readjust that timeline that was sent to the school committee. So that might be another motion. I don't really know how to explain how to set this all out, because there are a few things. So I'll just put the motion out there. Well, I guess we don't have to do the 2-year because we're already a 2-year committee, so that's terrific. But put the motion out there to make a recommendation to the school committee to make a recommendation to the school committee that we continue the status quo with everyone going back to their home base, their home district schools, and don't do anything this year other than what Dr. Duba and the administration will have to do, which is the involuntary transfers or voluntary transfers, and continue to look at this as an advisory committee and look into the best options going forward for a longer term solution. The other thing that would do is it would give people time, if we had to say to them, especially people buying in this area, okay, well, this is where you will now be redistricted to, or this is where we will be moving the lines for the next, excuse me, X amount of years, or, until we probably have to do this again, because that's just kind of a thing that has to happen, it seems, every 5 to 10 years. So, that's my motion.
Can I just ask a question about the motion,
Absolutely.
just to clarify? So this motion is saying that we are not making any decisions for this 25-26 school year? And even if in next committee meeting we say like, oh, we think we came up with this great solution, we are not doing it. Is that what this motion is saying?
I mean, I think we have to. Yeah, that's what my motion would be. I think I have to just be bold and just say, just not do anything.
Sorry.
No, yeah.
I have so many questions. I guess my question is for Dr. Duber and Mr. Mezzanotte. Logistically, like let's say that we all agreed on this plan in front of us. Logistically, would this be something that we could get done by September?
The plan you're talking about is the plan.
Plan B. I guess my question is what more can we come up with within the next year? I don't know if that's
So
insensitive
I think you're asking good questions. So logistically, yes, could we do that, right? We would have to, a lot of outreach with the community, and if this was the case of what it would be, and sharing transportation routes and what that would look like, and letting families visit the other schools. So logistically, can we do this? Yes. Your second question, what else more would we do? We have additional projections coming out, data that we can look at that we should have in the next few weeks.
And do you think that will have such a high effect on this plan that it's something that we need to consider?
I can't answer that. I cannot answer your question because I have not seen that data yet.
Okay.
The reason why I'm saying that it's important data for us to look at because we haven't seen it yet. We don't know if those projections that we're going to be getting are going to change a lot from what we had already. We know they're reconsidering all of the housing developments that are happening in town. It's just more data for us to be looking at and to consider what happens over the next 10 years.
Okay.
Are there bubbles anywhere? Do we see drops? Do we see increases? We see that the concerns actually shift to a whole other area of town for us to look at. So, once we have that, we had a meeting today. They're putting the final reports together. They said that the next few weeks we could have that, which means now we're moving into April to look at that, to consider, which means we're moving closer to June of bringing a recommendation to the school committee.
Okay, thank you.
And that's, somebody asked the question like, how late is too late?
I wouldn't go past June, because there's a lot of planning needs to happen, right? You need to
Right,
let
yeah,
families
for
know
sure.
what's going on.
But
We need to
June
look
is not
at
now, so I
staffing.
wasn't sure.
So,
Right, so then, well, okay, I mean, I can rescind that motion. If we wanna keep working, my concern is that in order to kind of work backwards from June, we have to get something to the school committee to get it discussed and approved. So now we're working into April, May, we're not even getting the projections back until around then. Yes.
What I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing is that we're looking to wait on anything new in light of the fact that we have feedback that we've heard, in light of the fact that we still have data that we are waiting on, yes?
Yes.
And that in light of that, and in light of the data that's gonna be coming in light of the timeline that it would take to process that data to get a change in place for next year, that we're asking to hold on that, continue the discussion, continue the study, continue this group's work, right?
Right.
Until,
Well, right, unless the group thinks that by June we can have that answer that's going to hold us over, right, for the next X amount of years.
Well, by June, we might not have all of the answers, but we might have some answers, right? So
Right.
by June, we have a new map that everyone agrees upon, right? And we voted to not do anything for next year, then we could be disservicing some families.
Okay.
Like, if I'm on Daniel Drive and I'm an incoming kindergartner and I know that in first grade they're gonna go to Fish and Goat, I might want them to go to kindergarten sooner. So I think until it's logistically not feasible to move forward with. I think it's too soon to go.
Okay, that's fair, and I really appreciate the feedback, because, yeah, I love hearing from people of these ideas.
Based on your motion, just so I'm clear, would the numbers for next year be A? Would be
It would,
A on this?
So,
so which?
Right, so if we don't do anything,
Yes.
then that first sheet, that is, no, that is looking at putting everyone back in, not accepting any voluntary transfers and no redistricting, that's what it would look like. So if we do nothing, A is what it looks like.
Okay, so if.
Just so we don't take comments or questions from the community at this point, if you can just hold it for public comment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was just kind of a question for you that, I don't know if it just clarified for everybody. How do you, kind of come up with the involuntary moving? Because you said you handle that yourself?
So we, right now, that's based on as registrations come in, but we also consider if there's siblings already in the school. So we try not to transfer, let's say kindergarten for this case here at Hamilton, right? We don't want to move a kindergarten student if they have a sibling in the school. So we're looking at non-sibling related families, and then also looking at as registrations came in.
Gotcha.
So just looking at those kindergarten numbers for A, we have 3 teachers, but 64 students.
which,
We're already over, and we have 0 space in the building. So we're gonna have to move, already there are gonna be children who cannot go to Hamilton.
That's right.
Correct.
That's right.
I just wanna be clear about that.
Right.
And I also want to add that I want to make sure, I want to piggyback on what Dr. Sanders said. It's not just about space, it's also about safety, it's also about academic support. And with our numbers right now, we're not in a good place. We're simply not. I think that my priority for, our priority for Hamilton is safety. That's number one. I think that's important. I think that, even if we slow down, we can go through projections and then talk about where we are, and how those impact, because that's an important piece of this. I think that we need to remember that student safety comes first.
Will modular classrooms not solve the safety problem?
No.
You still see other kids at recess and at lunch.
And you're losing learning time by traveling, and there's a safety concern.
max in every classroom, is that fair to those children?
And then like what Dr. Duza said, who's going in those modular classrooms? And then my concern is, okay, so now our Hamilton community is going to start fighting against each other. Well, I don't want my child's classroom in that modular classroom.
and I will say, that was kind of what happened 2 years ago with previous administration of talking about putting modular classrooms there.
Yeah, they don't have the same safety features, where right now we have the vestibule. Always sounds like vegetable, but vestibule, where you have the badge in, then you have a space and another badge in. That's purposeful, that's a safety precaution in case anyone were to get into the building.
You can't connect the
No, you really
modules?
can't connect modulars. And I'll take a risk to say, we looked at this in the district I was working in. It was taking 2 years to get any of the modulars even remotely in, was one issue. I think that's probably gonna be even more a problem right now because of where they're built. And 2, they get moldy very quickly. You can talk to Barrington about that, and the teachers working in that particular district about how moldy the modulars are. So it's not ideal. We don't have the same protections, and we're gonna still have the same problem at lunch and recess of too many kids in the same space.
So it's ideal that my son going into kindergarten has to go to a different school than my daughter in 2nd grade?
I don't think anything's,
Yeah, I'm gonna call the meeting to order. This is not proper open meeting.
Yeah.
Well, there's time for public comment, but I will rephrase what I said earlier. In looking at making the transfers, we are not going to transfer a student that has a sibling in the school.
Yes. I would like to make a motion that the committee continues to work. We continue to meet as we had planned, and we carry on with that until we reach a deadline.
And I would like to rescind my motion. No, honestly, I say things and I want to get people talking and I want to get people fight back against me, you tell me, and then it gets me thinking, I love this, that's good,
Do we need the
that's good.
second to rescind it?
I'll second.
No, she can just.
She can rescind,
She can
okay.
rescind.
I rescind,
So there's a
somebody else
motion
can
on the
second it.
So we have a
table.
motion on the table.
I'll second the motion for discussion. Any discussion? All right, want to call it to vote? All in favor to continue working on this until we come up with a solution?
Aye.
Any nays? Okay. We're gonna move to public comment because it's getting late. So, is there anyone that didn't sign up for public comment that wants to sign up for public comment before we start?
High school students are wondering if they could move at night.
Yes, let's go.
Thank you.
Hold on, they can go do their homework.
We'll get to that.
Are we in? All right. Are you signing up? Okay, perfect. All right, so public comment is going to be limited to 5 minutes. I'm going to call out your name, and I'd like you to come up here and speak, and I will let you know when you have 30 seconds left. Michael P.
Hello, I'm Michael Portal. So wanted to take a minute. So I started looking through the projections during the meeting, listening to everyone talk, and I know one of the big points that I think still needs to be weighted on, which it sounds like Megan said they were talking about in the next school board meeting, is the pre-K. So that really needs to be taken into account, because if that can't happen, I think scenario 2 is out the window, because that puts you over capacity in Fishing Cove. But if it does happen, with scenario 1, that puts Fishing Cove down at 73% of their aspirational capacity, which kind of brings me to beg the question, why are we moving any kids out of Fishing Cove if it's that low in capacity? It's actually only, just in relation Quid, which is, we keep talking about is underutilized, is at 69. So it's a 4% difference to say, hey, let's move kids out of one that's 73, but 69, we need a bunch more. Also to point out, I know we main conversations were about scenarios 1 and 2 based off these PowerPoints. I do want to point out that scenario 2 seems kind of odd. We're moving kids from Hamilton to Fishing Cove and leaving 4 classes with overages compared to doing nothing has 2 currently. So that seems a little strange that wasn't kind of discussed a little more, as well as putting 2 classes in Fishing Cove close to capacity. But I do want to point out, so if the pre-K does get moved, I think I heard that's opening up 5 classrooms in Fishing Cove, depending how they're utilized. I know I heard something about 2 being used for IP, which is great, but that also leaves 3 that are unused, which could be an opportunity to say, hey, let's put a kindergarten classroom in there, knowing that we're already expecting an abundance of kindergartners. And that would actually solve the only overage from scenario 1, as well as possibly bringing Hamilton kids in there too from kindergarten, considering they have an overages, which would then allow you to stay in the same school, in a school that is going to the same middle school, which I know is a big sticking point, which was one of the agenda's topics as well. So I do want to say, obviously I'm not a fan of any movement in kids with all the stuff they've already been through. The amount of stuff they've been through by the time they're 5 is nuts during COVID, and sheesh, we had killer bees in 2020. So it does seem like we do have to look at, I know we're trying to balance the schools, but it seems like Fishing Cove doesn't really have an overage problem, so needlessly moving a neighborhood that's not really causing an issue with the school, at least with any numbers we currently have, seems like an oversight and maybe something that's trying to be pushed that might actually not be a solution that's viable. But right now, and then I wanted to say too, like I just said, right now it seems like most of the issues are coming up for an incoming kindergartner. Based on scenario 1, I think the only real overage we have is grade 5 in Fishing Cove, and then the overcapacity as total in Hamilton based on these numbers. But I mean, a solution that I don't hear that's been talked about either that should be kind of looked into is possibly a phasing solution, right? So if we're already saying, hey, Fishing Cove, we're gonna leave, or everybody, not just Fishing Cove, hey, we're leaving grade 5 students. All right, now those grade 5 students leave, that's where a lot of there's more people in grade 5 than there are in kindergarten, just based off of normal capacity. That's gonna kind of start limiting the amount of kids in the school, and using a phasing out option might be a good thing to actually look into as a possible scenario. And that's actually all I had, but thank you for your time.
Sean T.
Hey everybody, I did want to start by saying that I was actually very disappointed to see that Megan's motion was not taken further. You guys are all doing great work, but to answer one of the questions that was asked, what can we do better in a year? Not just will we have more data, but you'll have time to be creative. I've seen one thing in this, and it's not intentional, I'm sure, but significant cognitive bias. One of the first ideas suggested back in December was moving Reynolds Farm, Fishing Cove, and also the Hamilton stuff started coming up. There has really not been a lot of creative other solutions proposed. I haven't seen a lot of alternate neighborhoods suggested for Fishing Cove. For example, we have a map up on the screen right now, and I'm not trying to target this neighborhood, I just want to point out, there's a Fishing Cove neighborhood in the southwest that we are talking about busing Hamilton kids along with because it's convenient because the bus route's there. Should the bus route even be there? This is rhetorical, I'm just trying to point out that you guys have done a great job looking at the scenarios that have been put in front of you, but I would really like you to see, really look at what other solutions are out there. And maybe it's not modular, maybe it's not something we've suggested yet, but we need to not be pigeonholed into just thinking about one thing that's in front of us. Like Mike said, there are some data errors here that are kind of significant in what you guys are thinking. He mentioned that with pre-K still there, so we talked about having a 97% utilization of Fishing Cove in scenario A, and that not being good. Well, it's 107% if you also have preschool added into the second scenario. I think how the data is presented, and I don't think this is on purpose, I'm going to clarify that, but how it's presented, sometimes we have preschool in it, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we assume this, sometimes we assume that. We need a consistent baseline that we're comparing our scenarios to. We need consistent metrics. How do we know if something is successful if the sand is shifting underneath us? Just to kind of summarize that, like Mike pointed out, in scenario A, we have 3 overcapacity and 4 at risk of capacity, meaning the orange ones. If you look at scenario B, you have 4 overcapacity once you account for that cut position that, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. Jennifer, you mentioned in the beginning. You also have 5 at risk of going over, meaning, again, those orange ones. So quantitatively, there are substantial risks here, and that doesn't mean it's off the table. But I haven't heard anything in the committee discussions that point that out. All I've heard is good points, but I haven't seen the cons really discussed. In addition, I'm concerned about overcrowding in Fishing Cove too, but I'm also concerned that the data really needs to be done right. Because when we redistricted, I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, we moved what, about 80 kids out of Hamilton? Into Hamilton? A little more?
150 from Stony. We received about 150 students from Stony Lane, you can correct me if I'm wrong, maybe about like 2018, 2019. With no,
I might have the wrong
no
numbers.
extra help. It was just the previous administration just kind of moved them over.
And that has nothing to do with anyone in this room,
No.
except that we're going to be undoing what they did. I would hate to see the same thing happen here by acting prematurely. And when we talk, there were some good conversations about, hey, let's make sure we don't, I forget the word, but disenfranchise the families who could benefit from this. But I'm just going to point out, forcing a redistricting to 100 families who weren't expecting it coming up in the near term, and again, not through you guys' fault, you guys were out there, the open meetings are there, but clearly it's become more aware. that is gonna have the same impact for those families as a family who is involuntarily transferred. To that family moving, it's the same thing. I understand that we have to redistrict at some point or come up with a solution at some point. But let's not lose sight of the fact that doing something minimal now, such as involuntary transfers, may allow us to get a better solution that lasts longer and gives our students the best chance of success in all of our schools. I would also like to point out that we keep talking about no growth in Hamilton, but the projections in here show that the population is going to be shrinking slightly. That's something that should be considered. Sorry, trying to cover my notes here. Sorry.
30 seconds.
Oh, good. I think that was actually all my points. I do want to thank you all for the fact that you're attacking this with passion and trying to get a solution. But please consider the things I've said.
Teresa H.
I originally knew I wanted to say something tonight, but I will just start with what I was thinking. I want to thank all of you for being a part of this committee. I'm sure you feel the heat because things have been going on, and I will repeat what was said to us last night. We hear you, we hear what you're saying, we're listening, but I have my notes. In the last subcommittee meeting, I heard somebody ask about possibly Brown looking at the data. I think the reason we're all here is because trust has been lost. We just would like a second pair of eyes to come and present to you the data that is everywhere in our district. I just feel like it needs to be done to regain trust, and it was somebody's idea on this committee, so. Are we open to not redistricting if they come and say, it is tight, it's as tight as it can be safely, but it is going down, because that was the last number that we saw. Could Davisville Academy, in whatever capacity that it expands and opens, could it be a lottery situation where you build, we heard about in Warwick where there are special needs kids, and you lottery the seats in the room to balance it so that they're not on their own and all alone. I thought that was a great idea. It was something we heard from one of the parents. I used to have a job in statistics. COVID is a red herring. It's gonna be, the reason everything is purple in that kindergarten year, I have a 5-year-old, there's a lot of COVID babies, and it's a bump, it's not a trend, it's a red herring. Listening to what Dr. Duva was saying, we're new around here, and I was shocked by the lottery system. I think that a system like that feeds into the emails you received. It caused it, because you created a situation where you had people pick their own favorite school, and I think that's what happened. There was a trend and popular demand, and it creates.
We don't have a lottery system.
I mean
the
voluntary lottery. I mean I heard that the voluntary transfer. I think that fed into what we're seeing.
I agree.
So I wonder if grandfathering that out would reduce that thing, and then where you buy the house, you go to school, which is what we would expect. That's what I would expect. And then you give a chance to the neighborhood, if you do that gradually, for them to gel around a school. Like early in your conversation, you were talking about when there were some transfers and a bus was going down a road and it was headed towards Stony Lane, so you had kids go there. When that happens, sometimes I think you should take a risk in transportation to direct people to a school that needs filling. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that was an early point that you had made. Yeah, that was just in general to use school buildings, like to fill buildings to capacity, and I understand it from a budget point of view, but instead of allowing a school that might need more attention or more love to get it, to help it be more popular. I mean, I haven't been in Quidnasset, we're new here, and I did pick a house based on ratings. So I understand what you're saying, but I also, I'm not sure force filling is the way to go. All right, that's it.
Bob A.
Well, thank you everybody for being part of this, being engaged, everybody that came. You guys are doing awesome, we really appreciate it. Let's figure this out together. I love the idea of maybe throwing some new ideas out there. One thing that I heard today, we have 5 kindergartens coming to Stony? And maybe one crazy idea would be, what if we turned Stony into a kindergarten school? So, we could even phase it.
So I just want to clarify that. There are 5 kindergarten classrooms at Stony Lane right now.
Correct.
It doesn't mean they'll be there next year. That was based
Correct.
on.
Oh yeah, I'm just saying, brainstorming ideas that go beyond just saying we have, 2 areas that we want to move to make everything happen. You could phase something like that as well. It could just be, if Hamilton's really at capacity, then this year's kindergartners only maybe one of those 3 classes could go there, and there would be others that would potentially move out of there in a phased process. I do believe, does Stony have both middle schools happening right now? So some go to Wickford and some go to Davisville? Or Fishing Cove's both? Yeah, so you could then again, potentially figure out a way to address that as well. If you're moving some of those Stony kids and some, there may be a way to move all of those numbers around as well. I'm not saying it's the greatest idea, I'm just saying it's something else that we may want to think about. If we think about Stony being maybe the most centrally located schools of them all that everybody in town could get to, regardless of where you were, that might be an option there as well. Really, I just think everybody's trying here and everybody's a little frustrated with what we heard. I know I ran into a transparency issue 2 years ago when I signed up my son for kindergarten in, I think, April or maybe it was March, and it was too late, and they said he was going to have to be redistricted or go to a different school for that year. And it just seemed as though, at that point in time, it really came to my attention that we just want to know more. And I really appreciate that you guys have been making such an effort, and I appreciate everything you said today as we've all been coming out here, and just really want the transparency to keep coming, and I know we'll all figure it out. I really support the idea as well for not doing anything next year, as you guys said, so I was upset to see that rescinded, but I understand also where you're all coming from, and you want to get this solved, and that's why you're here. So thank you, everyone, and let's keep going. Let's do the right thing. What's the rush?
Megan M.
Hi. Okay, so it's a little bit of a mess, guys. First of all, I super appreciate the detailed breakout of the data. I think that was obviously needed from a lot of the conversations in previous meetings. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to talk through that and really dive in, because it did help shine some light for me anyway on why we were making these decisions and why it was necessary. I think my approach to all of this is kind of zoomed out. I sort of feel as though it's too late for my kids, unfortunately. I have a 3-year-old and a 1st grader at Hamilton. It feels inevitable that this will, if not next year, the year after, impact my family. I almost want to ask the question, having come from a school district in Massachusetts that had 5 elementary schools, redistricting wasn't a thing. It never happened. Is this the best approach for our kids? It is not good for kids. I don't think I've heard anyone in all of the conversations say, oh, this is fine, this is a good thing for children. It's not. It's not good. Any child that is forced to move away from all of their friends is going to be impacted, and I keep hearing it's really hard. Yeah, it stinks. Seems like this has been happening in this town for maybe 20 years. Is there a better way to deal with issues like this, with growth, with shrinkage? in populations. I'd really love to understand what other communities do, maybe even outside of Rhode Island. But that's kind of what I'm left with is, it's late for my kids. Let's do better for the future and maybe make this something of the past. I did really appreciate, so sorry, moving on. I appreciated understanding the long-term plan is to align the middle schools. That was kind of a bigger question that I had. I do think there could be more transparency for the future. If we do need to stick with redistricting, can there be a 5-year plan? I know my family, having moved from a neighborhood that was and still is in the Hamilton district to one that is right over there, that may be moving. It would have been really nice to know, even 2 years ago, that this was even on the plan, that we were potentially impacted. Yeah, I just think there needs to be more clarity in the future. It sounds like you guys already know 5-6 years from now, this is gonna have to happen again. So what does that look like, and can we start talking about that now so families can make decisions that work for them proactively? So thank you.
Giovanni R.
How's it going? Appreciate all the work you guys are doing, and really at the end of the day, there's just a couple things that I want to drive home that it said. It's really great to see a lot of transparency, Mr. Duba, on all this stuff here, and be able to understand what's going on. But one of the things that's really cool, so I'm a bit new to North Kingstown, right? I've been here a little less than a year. My wife, I think I mentioned this last meeting, been here a whole life, for 5 brothers and sisters, they all grew up through the North Kingstown system, and went through the whole redistricting thing before too, and they got to go to Stony Lane. Good for them, right? And for me, one of the main concerns that I've had, or as I've come to understand a lot, getting together with the Hamilton folks, is that we're all against the redistricting side, right? But there are 2 very different reasons for that, right? I don't think I've ever met people that identify with the school mascot of elementary school. So for the Husky people out there, right? I don't even know what the other elementary school mascots are. But one of the things that I wanted to kind of just talk through a little bit is that our concern really is not about distance, right? Quinnesset's another mile away, right? I think it's more so, and I know you alluded to this, Superintendent Duba, that the rankings don't tell the story, right? Well, that ranking and that perception about Quid has been here for a very long time, right? That problem hasn't been corrected, right? And for me, again, we can get into hey, why we moved to Fishing Cove and the area, all that kind of stuff. But for me, again, it goes back to the expectation of, you expecting us not to be upset by moving our kids from the 18th ranked school in Rhode Island to the 108th on par with Providence schools, right? I can just tell from all the reasons you guys stated, we're probably gonna get redistricting, right? We're probably gonna go to Quid, and that's fine. But what I would like to see is some sort of action around how you're going to fix that perception problem, right? Through this process, in the past few weeks, I've gotten to talk to a lot of parents from Quid, right? A lot of parents in the Forest Park area. I have not heard a single great thing about Quid, right? And not for reasons of bad teachers, anything like that, right? But there's a perception problem for a reason, right? And again, I don't want to see our kids disadvantaged because of that. So that's kind of one of the things that I just wanted to bring up overall. The other is really around, when you just think about, when I think about the idea of diversity in the community, one of the things that I took a look at, it's obviously very important to me, is the diversity of Reynolds Farm in relation to the rest of North Kingstown, right? Just so happens that Fishing Cove is the 2nd most diverse school at about 20%, right? Our neighborhood is quite diverse. I encourage anyone to go out there on a sunny day, you can see it this week, right? Indian, Latin, Hispanic, Asian, you name it, Black, we've got it all, right? So to move what I find that's very important in kids' educations early on, a diverse set of students to a majorly diverse school, to move in, and say this the way I feel, white kids into another school to make it more white, across the train tracks has certain optics to it, right? Let alone what it actually means for your kid to grow up in a diverse environment. So those are just a couple of the key things overall that I just wanted to bring up that are concerning to me as a parent, right? Someone who's moved to NK, to understand that hey, what are the things, and this is probably not the subcommittee to deal with, that's right, okay, how are we gonna fix Quid, that's a whole school committee, superintendent do a problem, right? But the other piece is, how are we looking at diversity, right? Because by doing this, you're actually making Fish and Cove less diverse, right? And just increasing an already half diverse school. I quit. That's all I've got. Love the work you guys are doing, but that's where we're at.
Paulina S.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Paulina, and I'm a resident on Boston Neck, 569, which now, after this meeting, is a little up in question of where, if I'm in redistricting or not, which leads to what everybody has said. We're confused. There's no transparency. This is kind of throwing everybody off kilter because we don't know what's happening, and this is about children. Children need consistency, and I was at a town meeting yesterday, and one of the doctors, Dr. Page, said that her sons had redistricted at least 5 times each. Well, in their elementary school, they're only there for 5 years, into middle school. So the majority of their schooling, they've been to a different school every time. Is that what's gonna happen to our kids? We're gonna have them redistrict next year, maybe then in 2 years, then again. So how are kids able to grow roots somewhere? How are they able to get, keep friendships if you're gonna be shuffling them back and forth? What I'm asking for is a plan that will stay in place long enough so kids can get through their elementary school years without having to move about. I feel like we have the space, we have the area, we have the resources, because there's no school that's a bad school in North Kingstown. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. Let's talk about inner city. These schools are great. We are very, very, very lucky, but I feel like we could have some more consistency for our children. And if we could maybe take a little bit of time to formulate a plan that will stay in place for a long period of time for our kids in the future, that is what I am asking for today. Thank you.
Hi, Ruann Sardelli. I have my computer because you all have better eyesight than I do, apparently. I just wanted to start by saying I really agree genuinely with the comments around being respectful. We don't want to lose friendships. We don't want, just the same reason that we are fighting for our kids to have a consistent experience. It's because of the friends they have. It's because of the experiences they are having, and we want that to be consistent, and we want it to be what they expected and what we expected. So, picking fights across lines that may or may not become true is really just not helpful for any of us, and really goes against why we are doing this and what we expect from our children. So, just want to put that out there. And I agree, we're choosing between great options. We have great schools in North Kingstown. If you just look at us on paper, we have great schools. So I think that, and many of us moved here because of schools, I think we are emotionally attached to our schools, which is an incredibly fair experience to have as a parent when you have multiple children go through a school. We're attached to our communities. I think the comment about bike riding and having the people around you be part of your support system for school is really important. And I think we have an appropriate concern for the social and emotional well-being of our kids. What we're asking for is well thought out lines on a map based on accurate and current data and projections, as well as phasing and options that respect our students and families. Moving kids in grades 4 and under to a new school in one fell swoop is an amputation instead of a treatment. I will put this in email. I just want to point out, because data is where I feel comfortable, not up here. The data that is being presented, which I assume has gone through many levels, has a lot of concerning inconsistencies in it, and either requires additional explanation or additional looking at. Inconsistent numbers between page 1 and 2. Unclear if special programs are included in head counts on page 1 and 2. They're called out separately in some places, not others. Page 2 is marked projections for 24-25. I would assume we have accurate data for this. I don't know if that's...
I explained that earlier. I said that this sheet was our projection sheet that we're using for the upcoming year, and all of the numbers are updated as our current.
Okay, I'm sorry, I missed that.
That's okay. I just, when we talk about inaccuracies, if there's something that someone's questioning, you just email me so we can look at that data and know, because all the data is coming right out of our student information system of how many students we have and what grades and where they are. So
yeah, but when it's being presented on 2 different pages with 2 different numbers, it's going to call into question sort of what the process is that brought it to that point. We're using October 2020 or 21 for data projections. You know, I think when you look at those compared to where we currently are in 24 and 25, it shows that those projections are fairly off, which projections are going to be. If we are making these kind of decisions, it would be nice to have refreshed projections data based on, you know, 24 at least, if not 25. Aspirational head count, I think you did touch on this, so again, I think it's where we need explanation and context. You know, the aspirational head count at Hamilton is 82% of functional capacity, while at Stony Lane it's 96% of functional capacity. You know, I think it's just, if we are gonna put those numbers out there and use those as the benchmark, what's driving it. Current head counts are below RIDE, 95% at all schools. Projections, though flawed, show decline in proposed. I think it's just, again, bringing in that refreshed data, bringing in those accuracies and the context and explanation for it would help everyone here feel more comfortable with the decisions as we move forward. Thank you.
Josh. Andre.
Hi there, Andre Delenko. I am in the, as of right now, the area that is potentially being moved, depending on what the committee comes up with. Once again, thank you all for kind of the work that you're doing. I know you do not envy being in your position, so thank you for what you're doing. But a couple of things, additional things that I want to follow up on that some people have said already, but that I wanted to clarify. So one is distance. How long do the bus routes become from that area that is already on the Fishing Cove line, so the Ennipatucket and Prospect line? How long does that bus ride actually become for a student? I have a first grader in Hamilton right now. I have a almost 3-year-old who would be Hamilton if we don't redistrict. So that's one question. Two is, somebody already brought up kind of the kids and the social and emotional well-being. During COVID, I had my kid in 4 different preschools over the course of 4 years. Just because of school shutdown, preschool closes, like, where do we go? There are some kids who are gonna do really well with adjusting to new environments. Some kids are not. We know this particularly from military families, right? What are the support systems that are gonna be in place for a kid who does get redistricted, and kind of to help get them acclimated if it is a kid who is not as good at acclimating? Academically, they might be totally fine, but then we see it as parents when they come home, kind of the acting out, et cetera, that happens. So what are the supports that we're gonna have? And then I think any proposed maps that the school committee comes up with need to be projected up on the website. Right now, unless I'm not looking in the right place, all I can see is the current plans. So I think it'll be helpful from a transparency perspective for us to know kind of like what is out there and kind of what are the potential plans that are being thought of. Thank you for your work.
Sarah G.
Hi everyone, I'll keep this short, I know it's late. I appreciate you all too. I absolutely do not envy the seats that you guys are in right now, especially with this public outcry that's happening. So thank you so much. I have 3 points I want to make. I really do, if you do look at this current redistricting plan, I would look at the Fishing Cove caps again. My kids are in Hamilton right now and I absolutely want them to be safe. I want there to be enough room. But I would look at the Fishing Cove data, because like somebody said earlier, the pros have been talked about, but then Fishing Cove is over capacity. And so if we're moving, you know, Hamilton over capacity to Fishing Cove over capacity, then I think that needs to be a discussion around the table on how we're gonna kind of manage and navigate that, if that's the problem in Hamilton. My second point is I also would like more information on the functional and the aspirational numbers. I do think that that's really important information as to how those aspirational numbers were developed, to really understand. I think the community would have a lot more understanding if it was based off of class sizes and teacher ratio and all of that, because what I heard during the meeting is that 95% is a ride capacity, the functional capacity is ride as well, but the aspirational is the North Kingstown School District has put some data. No,
The aspirational number comes from RIDE as well.
aspirational comes from ride as well. So I think getting more clarification around that, because the numbers don't make sense when you really look at it across the board, would be really great. And please, nobody get mad at this other suggestion that I'm gonna have. I do think that there needs to be a larger oversight of kind of all the communities within North Kingstown as we're looking at this. The only proposed plans that we've seen are the neighborhoods close to Hamilton and Reynolds Farm. And I do think that there's more data coming out. I also want to suggest, if as we're getting creative and thinking about, I am a believer that middle school is a natural transition for children. I think that parents really prep their kids for that natural transition. I don't think that there needs to be a clear funnel into one middle school or the other that would affect elementary school education. I do think that's a very natural transition for children to lose some friends, to gain some friends, to go into middle school in that capacity. So I would encourage the committee, it sounds like that's like a overall done deal that we're trying to work toward that, but I would encourage the committee to think about that if it allows for other options to be laid on the table when we're looking at the elementary school education.
Tara D, and if you did not sign up to speak, but you would like to, please come see me. This is your last call.
I have more of a question versus a comment, but I just need a little bit better understanding of like what an involuntary transfer consists of. Is it mainly like kindergartners, and how does the registration process work? And is it only incoming kindergartners that should be doing this?
So the involuntary transfer would be at any grade level or over cap. So right now, like we were talking about kindergarten, because we know Hamilton's already over cap for kindergarten. If there's a third grade at Quidnesset, then we'd be looking at that and saying, okay, well, once we hit cap, then based on registrations, when registrations are coming through, because we keep track of, when they're coming in, we would have to transfer students.
So
But we would consider if there's a sibling, right? So if you have a kindergartner and a third grader, but third grade's full and kindergarten's not, we're not, as long as, as long as we don't have to, we wouldn't want to move you who has a sibling, right? So based on how many kids we have and everything, that would be like the last group of kids that we look at having.
Should other grade levels be registering again? And how would you like determining like who would get moved if they're over cap?
No, so registration only happens when you're new to the district.
Okay.
So if you're in second grade, you're automatically moved to third.
This is kind of random off topic, but I know that there's other points of this group about start times. I don't know if that's anything that was gonna.
We have not gotten there yet. We will.
Because Hamilton's start time is extremely.
So if you need to sign for public.
Oh, I see it. I was just gonna pose on to her question about, so when you read involuntary district, for like later grades, is that really just kids moving in?
It's kids moving in.
Okay.
Yeah, because what we do is we look at those bubbles, right? So let's say we have a current second grade, like our current second, let's say in a school, current second grade has 4 classes. We know as they're moving up, that third grade needs 4, so we plan for 4, right? That's something we do. We look at shifts of what we need to do, or we budget for those teachers. It's when new families come in and register that put it over cap, they then have to get transferred somewhere else.
Logan?
Hi, my name is Logan Nicholas. Thank you for throwing me in last minute. Thank you all for having us here tonight. Yeah, I'll also be quick. Another one that just finds it unfortunate that Megan's proposal wasn't considered more. I think there was a lot of parents here last week at the school committee meeting just saying, let's just give this more time. There was a lot of voices shouting that out, and it just seems like we're trying to rush this decision. And again, these proposals aren't anything different than what were proposed at the prior meeting, which to me is just, there's nothing, I'm from Reynolds Farm, and there's nothing in these proposals that take us out of this, like, you know, we're looking at neighborhoods all over the place, but no, Reynolds Farm is the target for having to move no matter what it seems if there's a redistrict, and it is frustrating for me. And I know, like, there's this whole thing, you know, after, like, looking at the map and everything here, and seeing, you know, how deciphering, you know, we want to keep this neighborhood with this neighborhood, if they go to that school, well, I know Devil's Foot Road Bridge, you know, you can't drive a bus over it, but it doesn't seem like busing around areas is an inconvenience if we can make it work. There's a lot of neighborhoods that would tie in better with, you know, families that go to Quinnesset on that side if we're looking at that kind of picture. So again, I guess I'm just frustrated that it just seems like for any redistrict, my neighborhood is being targeted specifically. It just sounds like it's a no-brainer. I know nothing's definitive on the table, but there's been no other proposal of redistricting that doesn't seem to not include Reynolds Farm, and I just feel like we've already kind of had our history written over there. So I would love to see other proposals that look at other areas of the town and see what else could work for all scenarios. But thank you.
Hi, my name is Viti Dave, and I'm also from the Reynolds Farms, as there are many people are sitting here from the Reynolds Farms as well. There are a few questions that we had, like if there is a child, let's say, for an example, the child is in, let's say, grade 2 or grade 3. Would that child also be transferred to a new school, or that child will be staying there until grade 5?
So the current, what we were currently looking at is just keeping the 5th graders there. So that could be something that we look at in other scenarios, meaning what would it mean population-wise? But what we're looking at is if there's a child entering 5th grade, they stay at the school.
Okay. And also in following year, for example, there are any extra space. Are there any opportunity for families to still take that space, or they still have to strictly go by the new redesign?
We would probably just, if we're shifting a neighborhood, moving that neighborhood and not doing any voluntary transfers.
Okay. And there is also one more thing that I think that people are talking in the neighborhood, especially in Reynolds Farms, because this community was built closely in last 5 to 7 years. So houses were very expensive when people bought those houses. Specifically, looking at the rating, they wanted their kids to go to a better school. Now, because of this, and if children are needs to send to a new school, it might impact housing value as well. So that could be some sort of financial loss for a lot of families as well. For people who really are paying the high number of tax on the property taxes. So there's something definitely needs to be considered on the financial impact as well. Thank you.
Thank you all. I'm going to just hand this back quickly to Dr. Duber to wrap up.
Next item on the agenda, we have our next meeting is March 24th at 6.
So our next meeting is March 24th at 6 p.m. We'll post the agenda and location for that meeting, probably be held here again, as long as the library's not being used. The reason why we keep going back and forth is because sometimes this is used for Girl Scouts. No, like to say,
It's listed as the 24th and the 25th in different parts of the website.
It is the 24th, it was originally the 25th, but there is a science fair.
Oh, yes.
So they moved it back to the 24th, it's the 24th.
I just wanted to make sure I could show up.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to
during the meeting? All in favor? Thank you for coming out.
Thank you.